Check. Check. Is this fair?
Good morning, everyone. Joseph Maestas here. I'm joined here in the hearing room with Commissioner Byrd. You know he's a prankster. Good morning, everyone. It's 9:30. Welcome everyone to the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission's regular weekly meeting. I'm Joe Maestas, your chairman. Mike Smith is not with us today. Judy, are you or Russell, are you going to help us get through this agenda? Russell Fisk, are you there?
I believe.
I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Yes, we will help you get through the agenda. It was either Russell or I can take over until Russell is available.
All right, Judy, then you're on. I'm calling this meeting to order. Please take the roll.
Yes. Commissioner Fishman.
Here.
Commissioner Hall. Maybe she may not be present. I recall her saying she had to be on a panel. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Here.
Commissioner Byrd.
Present.
Commissioner Maestas.
I'm here.
We have 4 commissioners and we have a quorum.
Mr. Chair, I am here. I have about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes I can devote to this meeting, and then I'll have to get back to what my participation that I'm supposed to be involved in. So I wanted to at least join the meeting for that period of time, so I'm here.
Then I revise that. Commissioner Hall is present and we have 5 commissioners and we have a quorum.
Thank you, Judy. Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance and the State Pledge. Commissioner Fishman, can you lead us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico and the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Commissioner Fishman, that was an A+.
Yay!
Get extra credit for that. All right, members of the commission, you have the agendas presented, but I do want to ask Commissioner Hall if there's any items you'd like us to move up, because I understand your time is limited with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I was thinking that it would be useful to bring to the fore case number 21-00309, a joint petition requesting the public that we initiate a study of public utility models. Could we move that to the top of the regular agenda, or top of the agenda would be nice. I think would probably be preferable.
Isaac, how many public commenters do we have?
We do not have any public commenters today, Commissioner Maestas.
Thank you, Isaac. Well, what I would suggest, Commissioner Hall, if we move case 21-00309 UT after public comment, but before approval of the minutes.
That would be very welcome. I very much appreciate it.
All right, can you make a motion to amend?
Yes. So, Mr. Chair, I move to amend the agenda to have the commission undertake case number 21-00309-UT. Move that, have the commission undertake that immediately following public comment period.
Mr. Chair, and Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is Sarah.
Yes, Sarah.
We have 4 special guests introductions this morning. So I'm not sure if you wanted to maybe move it before the special guests.
That would be nice, Mr. Chair. I'd appreciate it if we possibly could.
So before introduction of special guests?
Yeah.
Okay,
So, so my motion is accordingly amended, rather than to before public comment to before introduction of special guests.
okay, so we have a motion on the floor to move case 21-00309-UT to immediately succeed consideration and approval of the agenda. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Second by Commissioner Fishman. Any discussion on the motion? Judy, please record the vote.
Let me take the roll. Commissioner Hall,
Here,
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman,
yeah,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Okay, so our agenda is approved as amended. So next on the agenda, we have case 21-00309-UT. Is Russell here, Judy?
Commissioners Russell, I'm not sure if he's having trouble connecting. I don't know if you got an email earlier this morning, but he made some changes to the order. We could wait and discuss this later if he's able to make the connection, or I can read over the order. And he said it was, in the email, he said it was fairly self-explanatory. So would you, it's your preference. Would you like to wait, or would you like me to read the order?
Well, let's proceed with special guests until Russell can connect. And if somebody can text him just to let him know that he's up.
Yeah, we have. And so at this
Unless
point-
Judy, you're prepared to present on behalf of Russell.
Well, I like your suggestion of introducing the special guests, and then if you want to proceed with me reading the order, I can do that. We did discuss it. He's way, he has way more in-depth knowledge, but I am familiar with the order.
Okay, let's proceed with special guests until Russell can sign on.
Good morning,
Isaac, are
Mr.
you,
Chair.
or Sarah, before we allow the special guest to be introduced, we had some discussion about some matters on the agenda whereby parties that are affiliated with certain agenda items perhaps should not address the commission. Has that been made clear to the special guests?
Our special guests are all new employees.
Oh, okay. All right, then let's proceed.
Okay, Renata, you had some introductions. Would you like to make those now?
Good morning. I am very excited to introduce two new people to ASD this morning. I'm going to introduce them together. The first one is Monica Maestas. She is the new budget and financial manager. She comes to us from the Department of Veteran Affairs, and she has 14 years of experience working with various state agencies. Her concentration has been finance and administration, and here at PRC, she will serve as our chief procurement officer. She does oversee the financial services staff, and their various tasks go from purchase orders to P-card purchase to contracts to vouchering for payments. The second person I'm introducing today is Miranda Mascarinas. She is our new CFO. She comes to us from the Office of the State Auditor, and she began her career 15 years ago at the Office of the State Auditor. She has 15 years of experience in governmental accounting and auditing. She has overseen multiple state agency audits. Miranda also has served in the past as the Deputy ASD Director and CFO for the New Mexico Department of Finance and Administration. And I will say Miranda has hit the ground running. She has been busy assessing processes, reviewing our general ledger, and learning about the federal grants pertaining to pipeline safety. I am thrilled to have both of these ladies join the ASD team for PRC. And I believe they're both on this morning.
Awesome. Welcome aboard, Monica and Miranda. I don't know, Monica, I don't think we're primos, but we're not related as far as I know, but welcome aboard. Do you have anything you want to say, Monica?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be joining the team here at Public Regulation Commission. And we have a great team here at ASD. Super excited to work with Miranda and Renata as well. So I don't know, my family's up from Espanola, but my mom's from down south. I'm an Aggie by trade. So again, it's a pleasure to be here, working hard for the commission. Thank you, guys.
Welcome aboard.
Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
I just wanted to say, go Aggies. I'm
Go
in Las
Aggies.
Cruces. Yeah, there you go. Welcome aboard.
Arr.
I also want to say welcome
Miranda,
aboard.
before I open up the floor to the commission, Miranda, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Chair, and members of the commission. I want to just let you all know how excited I am to be here and to work with you all. And I'm just super fortunate to work with such an amazing team with Monica and Renata. And I'm excited to get to work with each and every one of you.
Thank you, Miranda. Members of the commission, any comments?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Hall.
I just wanted to welcome Ms. Mascarinas and Ms. Maestas very much. Heaven knows we need to keep ourselves staffed, especially in these important roles. So I'm just pleased to say that it's good to see such bright young faces on the screen who sound so ready and willing to dig in and do a good job. And I'm very pleased and grateful that Renata and Wayne and everybody jumped in and got the work done to find some real talent. So welcome, you're very welcome here.
Thanks, Commissioner. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, John Reynolds has a couple of new employees to introduce as well.
Okay, before we go to John, I just want to thank Renata and Wayne and HR for hiring these stellar employees to beef up our admin services. And so I'm pretty jazzed about this. And I like the use of the word team because that's what we are. So I appreciate the positive attitude. So I look forward to working with you both, Monica and Miranda. All right, John Reynolds.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning, commissioners. I was a pleasure meeting Miranda earlier this week, and it's nice meeting Monica today. Welcome. We have two new stellar employees at the utility division I'd like to introduce to you today. First off is Bryce Zadalis. He started 2 weeks ago. He is a University of Tulsa grad. He has advanced degrees from UNM and the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. And he is a doctor. I knew he was a PhD, and I see that his screen has the word doctor or DR in front of it. So we are very happy to have Bryce on board. He will be working in the accounting bureau under Gabriella. And our second addition is Lauren Lucero. She started this week. She is a grad from New Mexico Highland and University, and she came to us from the lab at Los Alamos National Lab, and we are very pleased to have her join us. And I failed to mention with respect to Bryce that he came to us from the Early Childhood and Education Development Agency as a data analyst. So we looking forward to working with both of them and appreciate the support of the agency and HR to make this all happen. Thank you very much. Well, please welcome Bryce and Lauren today. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Welcome aboard, Bryce and Lauren. We'll start with you, Lauren. Would you like to briefly address the commission?
Yes, good morning, everyone. It's so nice to meet you. I just want to say I'm very excited for this amazing opportunity, and I'm just really excited, and I'm happy to be part of such a great team. I'm learning so much. I just want to say thanks again.
Thank you, Lauren. Bryce? Welcome
Good morning,
aboard.
everyone. Thank you. Thank you for taking some time to introduce both Lauren and myself. I'm really looking forward to working with the PRC, serving the people of New Mexico, as well as collaborating with the Accounting Bureau and the broader Utilities Division. I think there'll be a lot of interesting projects to work on, so I'm looking forward to contributing as best I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. Any members of the commission wish to briefly address our new hires in Utility Division?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Hall and then Commissioner Byrd.
Yeah, I would like to welcome him as well. It's not often we get somebody on staff from such an exotic locale as Scotland here in New Mexico, but it's always nice to have more diversity than we already have. And it's also very nice, I think, to have someone like Laura who hails from a national laboratory and can actually, I was going to say, take advantage of that knowledge from the labs to inform her work. But I don't recall, John Reynolds, that you said what Laura will be doing in your division.
Thank you, Mr. Hall, Mr. Chair. I did fail to mention that Lauren will be working with the Telecommunications Bureau under Mike Ripperger. She's replacing a departure this summer. So they will be fully staffed with Lauren's addition. So that's where she will be.
Well, that's excellent. So I'm just very pleased, Mr. Chair, to have such qualified additions to our staff, and I hope they all feel very welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Any other commissioner wishes to welcome them?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Byrd. Sorry, I forgot about you.
Easily forgotten about. Well, good morning to our new staff members. Commissioner Maestas said we're all a team, and he's absolutely right. I always say we are a family. And so welcome to the family. We love to get new family members, and usually we hate to see our family members leave. But the lure to the dark side is strong. And so we encourage you to really consider ever leaving. Please stay, learn, grow, and your addition will make the PRC a stronger commission in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. Just to be clear, we are not the dark side. Any other commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Fisher.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, just welcome aboard, guys. It's exciting times ahead for the PRC in just so many ways. And hopefully all the stuff that's going on and all the change that's coming creates opportunities for lots of folks at the agency. And I'm sure praying that that's what happens for all of you. So welcome aboard.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. Any other commissioners wish to address our new hires in the Utility Division? I do want to advocate for an HR policy that we have a perfect balance of Aggies and Lobos on staff. So we'll be taking that up at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Mini
So
Lobos.
does that mean that we get, Mr. Chair, does that mean we don't get any Lobos on the staff?
I'm with you, Commissioner Fisher.
Careful. Anyway, Bryce, thank you. Go Lobos, Bryce.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, let's move on. Russell Fisk, are you with us now?
Yes, Russell is available and he was able to log on, and he'll take over case number 21-00309.
All right, thank you, Judy. Russell, you're on.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties getting with my laptop here, but I'm all set. So let me, 21:39, I'll go ahead and present on this matter. Pardon me. Okay, so
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner,
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Hall.
can I just ask Russell to try to be as succinct as possible in going through the proposed order? That's all.
You just did. Russell, be succinct.
yes, I will absolutely do that. So Commissioners, you see that I sent an email this morning with, is that about 6 o'clock this morning, making revisions to the proposed order with regard to these two events. There's probably two events that happened on Monday, one on Monday and one on Tuesday. The first is that, so I sent the initial version on Sunday night of the proposed order. And the proposed order as revised still has the same, I still provided the same three potential options for the commission to consider as the outcomes of the order with regard to the disposition, the potential dispositions of the petition that's before the commission, the joint petition of the joint petitioners with regard to the potential for a study to be performed in New Mexico to study the possibility of public power or a publicly owned electric utility and what the commission's role would be, if any, in such a study. Well, on Monday, after I provided the commissioners with the initial version of the proposed order, the joint petitioners filed a legal memorandum raising additional arguments in support of their argument that the commission has the power or authority or jurisdiction to issue, to participate in such a study by issuing binding orders, specifically bench requests to regulated utilities to further the proposed study of the potential for public power in New Mexico. That is something that, as you recall, at the open meeting of January 12th, where we had a presentation by representatives of the joint petitioners that was discussed openly, and I provided advice to the commission that to the effect that the commission does not have the power to do so, does not have the power to issue binding orders in this in such a study. And I went into some detail about that, but I'll get into a little bit more detail here, but I'll move quickly. And that was disputed by the joint petitioners. The other event that caused me to revise the order was the drafting, that my participation in drafting the FIRs, the fiscal impact reports, for the two memorials. This is House Memorial 20 and Senate Memorial 10, that the joint petitioners are pursuing as an alternative to the joint petition that's been filed with the commission. As you recall, there was discussion at the open meeting of June 12th as to whether this was a study that should be accomplished or it should be conducted at the legislative level, because the commission determined that the commission itself would not be able to take any action if the commission, as a result of any findings of the study, because the establishment and operation of a public power utility or publicly owned utility would require an extensive legislative an array really of changes to the law to establish it, operate it, decide how it will be regulated, et cetera. And the commission does not have the power to do that under the existing laws the existing statutes that are administered by the commission, such as the Public Utility Act and the related acts, such as Renewable Energy Act, things that the statutes under which the commission regulates existing electric utilities. Okay, so the order that I've proposed order from this morning, that I sent you this morning, like I said, and I said in my email that this would, I've made substantial revisions, but I still give 3 possibilities. I think first I'll jump to the potential outcomes. 3 potential outcomes with regard to the disposition. In other words, how the commission will, whether and how the commission will go forward with the some role in the joint petition. And those 3. Sorry, let me just get my memo.
Russell,
sorry. Yeah.
Just if you would please reference the commissioners to appropriate sections of your latest order. If maybe you might want to start on page 22, starting on sections 45 through 47, I think, or yeah, I think those are the 3 options in your order.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'll do that. I can attempt to share my screen. I've never done that before. So I don't know if I'll have any technical difficulties.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Hall.
Russell's aware of my time constraints.
Okay.
I wanted to just let him.
I'm sorry, I apologize, Commissioner Hall. Let me just quickly do that. So the 3 options, looking at page 22.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, Russell.
Yes.
You may not have been on when I announced I'm in a conference and I only have about, well, I'm going beyond the time I have to devote to this, but I have about 10 more minutes, and I was hoping if you could be succinct so we could get to our discussion.
Okay, I'll finish.
You're giving us 3 options. I know that the comments you're referring to were filed by the petitioner's attorney, but I think what's important to us is what you say in your 3 recommendations. So if you could get to that, I think that would help us.
Okay. So yes. So yes, Mr. Chairman, you're correct. I'm on page 22 of the revised proposed order, which provides 3 options. In paragraph 45, the commission could deny the joint petition, and a denial of would be a denial with prejudice. Whenever that's left open, whenever a denial of a petition or a complaint or another pleading, is it would be denial with prejudice, which would not allow, which would prevent the joint petitioners from filing another joint petition, because it would be a decision on the merits of the petition itself. In this sense, it would be the legal merits. It would be based on the finding that the commission does not have the power to issue binding orders to further such a study. So without that ability, the commission cannot meaningfully preside over or conduct such a study. The commission has no actual power to compel anyone to respond to bench requests, et cetera, any regulated entities, et cetera. And that, of course, is due to subsection B7 of section 884 of the PRC Act. 884 of the PRC Act defines the commission's powers and duties with regard to the areas of subject matter jurisdiction that the commission has pursuant to other statutes, such as the Public Utility Act. And as was in my original proposed order, I still advise the commission that is the controlling subsection, and that tells you the commission that it can only investigate matters as necessary to carry out the commission's responsibilities. And that my interpretation of that is that The commission cannot participate in a study like this or conduct a study like this because the commission is not within the commission's responsibilities under the existing statutes to establish or regulate an entity, an entity that's a type of entity, public power, that's very different from the current existing state of the market, which is privately owned, investor-owned public utilities, and rural co-ops that are member-owned. That state of the market is accepted as an assumption by the Public Utility Act, the Renewable Energy Act, the Efficient Use of Energy Act, and all statutes that under which the commission defines or regulates electric utility service in the state. As I noted, and as I said in my revisions, the joint petitioners argue that the public power is a solution that will provide better and more efficient ways to meet the goals of those statutes. And this order would say, but the statutes don't just provide the goals. For instance, the Renewable Energy Act doesn't just provide a goal for renewable portfolio standards that the commission is empowered to meet in any way it finds fit, or to look into all the different ways, different market structures are such that would meet that goal. These statutes also provide the means, and the means are the regulation of the market as it exists with privately owned public utilities, not the option of establishing a different type of market.
Russell?
Yes.
Chair, Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Fishman.
Ask a question. Do we have to make a legal determination here? I mean, I do not think we should go forward with this study, but I can justify that on practical grounds. And I'm a little bit reluctant to make a legal decision in the rushed way this has happened, or to set a precedent in defining what the statutes mean. So I'm wondering if we can just say, listen, this is something that's we shouldn't do because of certain practical reasons at this point in time, and just move on without trying to create some kind of legal precedent that it feels like everybody's rushing into.
Russell?
Oh, yes,
Mr. Byrd.
Excuse me. So with what Commissioner Fishman just said and what I am going to propose, I move that we table this issue until we get a joint memorial out of the legislature, hopefully giving us their desire and permission to move forward. It should just be a few weeks because this is a short session. So I'm going to move that we table this until a joint memorial is passed.
Mr. Chair, I support that idea, and I agree with Commissioner Fishman. I don't think we need or want to get wrapped up in legal issues associated with jurisdiction, which I think are unnecessary to the crux of this problem, I think. So I support I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Judy, I don't think there's no debate on a motion to table.
Fine.
All right, so Judy, take the roll.
Yes, Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Judy. Commissioner Hall, stay as long as you can.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to sign off now.
All right, enjoy the panel and the
Oh,
conference.
thank you very much.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Russell. I know he put a lot of work into this. But I do think, we've just got pragmatic reasons for doing this. And thank you, Commissioner Byrd, for your excellent suggestion.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, let's move on to consideration and approval of prior meeting minutes. Members of the commission, you have the minutes of the September 29th, 2021 open meeting and also minutes of the November 3rd, 2021 open meeting. Judy, can we adopt these in a single motion?
Yes, are you making a motion to approve both the September?
Yep, so moved.
29
I'll move
okay.
that we approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, second by Commissioner Byrd. Any discussion on the motion? All those in, I'm sorry. Judy, please take the vote.
Yes. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Byrd, second by Commissioners Fishman and Vicente Aguilar. Any discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. Judy, please read out the consent agenda.
Yes, the first consent agenda item is case number 21-00203 TRN in the matter of the application of Empire Transportation LLC DBA Empire Transportation for a certificate to provide non-emergency medical transport service. Next, 21-00259 UT in the matter of the formal complaint of George Baca and Maria J. Baca against Navajo Electric Cooperative. 21-00300 UT in the matter of the application of Continental Divide Electric Cooperative Inc., a New Mexico nonprofit electric cooperative, for approval of continued use of its fuel and purchase power cost adjustment clause. And 18-00109 UT, application for approval of El Paso Electric Company's 2018 Renewable Energy Plan pursuant to the Renewable Energy Act and 17.9.572 NMAC and revised rate number 38 RPS cost rate. Was there a motion to approve? And a second? If so, I can take the roll call.
Yep, we did have a motion and a second, so please record
Commissioner Maestas,
the aye.
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd. I didn't hear Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The consent action items pass 4-0.
Thank you, Judy. Let's move on to regular action items. We have none under transportation and we have one under utility matters. It's item number 6 in the case of 21-00318-UT in the matter of request for approval of a general rate adjustment pursuant to 17.9.540 Hemis Mountains Electric Cooperative, Inc. So Judy, tee it off.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I wanted to bring this matter before you today because it's been, I think, approximately 6 years since the commission has had a rate increase filed by a rural electric cooperative that had a significant number of protests. In this case, Amos Mountain Electric Cooperative, which is located in Hernandez, New Mexico, it serves approximately 31,200 customers, 27,600 residential and 3,500 commercial. And it has a very large service territory of 7,000 square miles in 5 counties of the state of New Mexico, including McKinley, Rio Arriba, Sandoval, San Juan, and Santa Fe counties. On December 30th, JMEC submitted an application and an advice notice number 116 for proposed rate increases to the following types of service: residential, small commercial, large power service, and large power service contract, and street and security lighting. In addition, EMS asked for a variance from Commission Rule 17.1.3.7b, which defines base period for purposes of a rate case as, quote, a historical 12-month period terminating at either the end of a quarter or no earlier than 150 days prior to the date of the filing. They are requesting a variance because they assert that the use of the immediate 12-month period did not produce fair and equitable results under the circumstances. And when they began gathering data for the 2020 base period, they found that the 2020 base period was severely impacted due to the loss of load caused by large-scale government shutdowns due to the pandemic. This loss of load in JMEC's large commercial class in 2020 decreased by 60.5% compared to 2019. Therefore, the allocation of an increase might be applied disproportionately to the residential class. So those are the two requests. They request the rate increase and the variance. However, under the statute, which is the applicable statute, is section 62878, and it states that upon the rural electric shall give written notice of the proposed rates to its affected patrons in New Mexico at least 30 days prior to the filing with the commission. Upon the filing of a commission of a protest setting forth grounds for review of the proposed rates signed by the lesser of 1% or 25 members of a customer rate class of the rural electric cooperative. And if the commission determines that there is just cause for reviewing the proposed rates on one or more grounds of protest, the commission shall suspend the rates and conduct a hearing concerning the reasonableness of any proposed rates filed by a rural electric cooperative. And then the statute goes on to say the protest shall be filed no later than 20 days after filing with the commission of the schedule of proposing the new rates. In this case, the customer protests needed to be filed by the close of business on January 19th, 2022, since the application was filed on December 30th, 2021. And on January 18th, 2022, there was a document entitled Protest that was timely filed. It showed the signatures of 149 members of JMEC who stated they opposed the proposed rates. There were 149 signatures on this one document that was filed. Although the protest was not on the form that the commission has developed for protest. It's in substantial compliance with the procedural rules. And the rule 17.9.540.11b provides that a protest is made but is not required to use the commission's form for protests. At this point in time, what I recommend is following a similar procedure to what the commission has previously done in its last rural electric co-op case. It's was filed by Kit Carson in 2015. It's case number 15-00375. And the proposed order would suspend the rates filed by JMEC in its advice notice 116, pending two filings. First, JMEC shall file its objections to the protest no later than February 3rd. And after that, no later than February 10th, staff shall file its determination as to 1, the number of valid timely protests per rate class. 2, whether or not it concurs with JMEC's objections to the protests, including reasons. 3, whether JMEC's filing of advice notice number 116 in application constitutes a complete application. 4, whether JMEC should be required to file a complete rate application, including a full allocated cost of service study and supporting testimony and exhibits. Whether the 5, whether the requested variance to use a 2019 base period instead of the 2020 base period should be used. And that's what the proposed order states, and I stand for any questions. I could also go through, if the commission wants, the reasons that JMEC has stated that it needs the rate increase, but the order does not go to the merits of the rate increase. It only requires JMEC to file objections and then staff to file responses, as I just detailed.
Thank you, Judy. Any questions for Judy? Judy, I guess I had one. I'm wondering, Jemez Mountains Electric Co-op cannot be the only co-op that's experiencing the same pandemic-related trends in terms of an imbalance in revenues, more from residential, less from commercial and small power rate classes. So is there anything we can do as an agency to assist the other co-ops? I realize that these situations, a protest, whether or not it has merit, is quite rare. You cited a Kit Carson case dating back to 2015. But I'm wondering, for example, I know that some of the co-ops have been carrying a large amount of arrearages, and I'm, as an individual commissioner, not sure when they intend to have those recognized as a reg asset, and if this action or request by JMEC is related to those as well, accumulated arrearages that could be impacting their operations. Is there anything we can do?
Commissioner, I guess I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that the statute limits our jurisdiction over rural electric cooperatives, and that they are member-owned and member-run. When there are certain triggers to our jurisdiction, and as I stated, even rate increases that are not protested would go into effect. So the reason that this has come to our attention was triggered by the filing of the protest. I think that the utility division may be able to perhaps give you the commission an overview of other rate increases that other electric co-ops may have put into effect without triggering any protests. But other than that, if they don't come to us, if it's not triggered by protest, we wouldn't even review their rate increases.
And Judy, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, you did regarding the Kid Carson case. Now that went to a hearing examiner. So this is a preliminary step to, I guess, establish whether or not the protest has merit. But at some point, if it does, then we could potentially make a decision in terms of referring it to a hearing examiner. Can you just briefly talk about the possibilities?
At this point, if there's the requisite number of protests, meaning over 25, and that they state just if the commission makes a determination that there's just cause, then the commission shall suspend the rates pending assignment to a hearing examiner and a hearing on the rate application and the rate increase. But the hearing and the case would be limited to the issues raised in the protests by the class. So these protests appear to be, again, that it needs to be determined, appear to be filed by residential class members, and they're protesting the rate increase to the residential class. But that is yet to be fully determined.
Gotcha. All right, those are all the questions I had. Any other commissioners wish to ask Judy any questions? If not, I support the order as written, and I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Fishman. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Byrd. Any discussion on the motion? Judy, please take the roll call vote.
Yes, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
The motion to approve the order as proposed passes 4-0.
Thank you, Judy. All right, let's move on to item 9, discussion and potential action regarding legislative matters. Wayne, are you going to lead the discussion on these?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I'm happy to do so. I'm happy to do so. We also have our subject matter experts, John and Mike and Russell, prepared to speak as well. I believe all of these items were on the agenda for last week, with the exception of Senate Memorial 10 and its companion House Memorial 20. I believe you also should have the FIRs that we have submitted on all of these items, with the exception of House Bill 6. We haven't yet received a request to submit a FIR on House Bill 6. I do know that House Bill 6 is very much a work in progress, though, so we may receive an FIR request on that, and we have a draft that's in pretty good shape and ready to go once we do. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I think I'll turn it back over to you to go through these individually if you'd like. And again, we're here to answer any questions that you might have about them as you go through them. And Art's here as well. Art's been working on House Bill 6, so he's available as well.
Well, what I'd like to do is I want us to proceed with the underlying assumption that all the commissioners have fully read the legislation, the summaries, and the corresponding FIRs, fiscal impact reports. And so, Wayne, do you want us to take us like a straw poll or a vote? What kind of action are you seeking from the commission regarding this legislation?
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, that would be fine. I understand that, and others can correct me if I'm wrong. I understand that has been the commission's practice in the past to go through PRC related legislation and take a straw poll in terms of whether the commission would like to endorse, oppose, or remain neutral on any particular piece of legislation. So I think that's sort of where we're at, the point we're at with these items. It's also possible, Mr. Chairman, of course, and members of the commission, that you could hold these over for further consideration into next week. I don't think there's any of these that are particularly urgent in terms of their movement. I'll give you two examples. I'm not saying you shouldn't consider them today, but I checked this morning, Senate Bill 42 and Senate Bill 71 are still in the Senate committees committee, which means they have not been ruled germane for this 30-day session, nor have they received a message. So those bills, the Senate committees committee meets every morning, so it's entirely possible that those bills would be considered today, and a determination on germaneness will be made. But at this point, the only piece of legislation that has seen any action is House Bill 37, which was passed yesterday by the House Labor Committee, not the Labor Committee, I can't remember exactly which committee it was yesterday, but there was a committee hearing, John will know, on House Bill 37. It did receive a due pass motion 3-2 on House Bill 37. I checked this morning, and Danielle did as well. I didn't see any other bills that we're tracking or that are on the commission's agenda today that are scheduled for hearings either today or tomorrow. So, the process will begin to move more quickly, of course, over the next few days and into next week. But that's just a status update on where these bills are.
Thank you, Wayne. And Judy, I have just a procedural question for you. We typically read the captions of the cases. I don't know if that's for the purposes of the public or for the purposes of the stenographer, but I believe our minutes include the agenda, which obviously has the captions. So do I need to read the captions of these pieces of legislation prior to discussion?
If the commission is planning on discussing or taking action on any of these bills or memorials in terms of letters of support or whatever they're planning on doing, I would read the caption. If the commission is not interested in discussing it, I don't think that there's a necessity to read the caption, because as you state, the agenda is part of the public record.
Thank you for that clarification, Judy. All right, so we have House Bill 6 first up regarding the Clean Future Act. Arthur O'Donnell, are you going to give us a brief presentation on this and then let us know what is in the potential letter of support?
Yes, Commission Chair and Commissioners, thank you very much. I did provide a summary of the act, and since the act itself is quite succinct, it essentially just recites what's in the act. And we have been, a letter of support was requested by the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Division, which is kind of spearheading this. So I have drafted a potential letter for your consideration as well. Just very briefly, this would put into statute the governor's goals for GHG, greenhouse gas emission reductions, that were previously stated in an executive order. By 2030, a reduction compared to 25 levels of 50%, and by 2050, a reduction to net zero, which could translate into 10%. The difference here from the Energy Transition Act is that the state's goals in the ETA were expressed in terms of increasing the renewable energy portfolio, with the implicit assumption that that would reduce greenhouse gases. This translates it into GHG reductions, which puts the state pretty much on the same footing with most other states' expression of their goals. The PRC is specifically cited as a state entity subject to some reporting requirements that by April of next year, presuming the bill passes, we would provide to MNERD and the Department of Energy essentially a greenhouse gas inventory of sources that are subject to our jurisdiction, i.e. electric generation, but also to provide some sense of what the downward trend should be and how the agency is responding to this. There are other elements of the act which don't particularly relate to the PRC, but that input of a state inventory of GHG would go into a report by MNERD and the Department of Energy of Environment that essentially establishes the baseline for 25 and gets all the state agencies working towards this goal. So that's what the bill does. By next year, we would also report to those other agencies what we need in terms of new resources, additional legislative authority, right, to carry out the programs that we envision, and any additional staffing. So that would be in the works for that report. In terms of the letter of support, I did want to mention that the commission is already working on this. And as I reported a couple of weeks ago, we are entering into a special project with support of the U.S. Department of Energy and the Argonne National Lab to create a GHG inventory of legacy fossil fuel power plants under our jurisdiction. And so this fits very nicely with that goal. And so the proposed letter of support basically says we support the act as written, and that let you know that we're already working on it, and we hope this bill passes. So with that, that's pretty much my summary.
Thank you, Arthur. Since we're being, requested to take action on this in the form of approving the letter of support, I'm just going to read the caption. This is House Bill 6 relating to climate, enacting the Clean Future Act, establishing greenhouse gas emissions limits, requiring reporting, providing powers and duties, enacting new sections of the Air Quality Control Act, directing the Environmental Improvement Board to adopt rules to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, directing the assessment of fees, creating a fund, and making an appropriation. So is there a motion to approve the letter of support? As you all have that letter, it has signature blocks by all 5 commissioners. Or are there any questions for Arthur regarding the legislation or the potential letter of support?
Mr. Chair, this is John Reynolds.
Yes, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and commissioners. And let me just mention, I've drafted an FIR for this bill. And let me just say to Arthur, I was aware of from last week about, or 2 weeks ago, about the grant that we got for inventory of greenhouse gas, and he's kindly invited me to the meeting tomorrow, I believe, Arthur. But I did not get a chance to speak with Arthur about this. So I just want to mention a few things, and as I said, he and I haven't spoken, so you may notice some contradictions, or if I could mention a couple of things, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
So and I have no dispute with Arthur's description of the bill. I believe that's correct. And so my focus is on the PRC's role. So the PRC is to report to the New Mexico Environment Department and Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources. And those 2 agencies are the ones responsible for monitoring and tracking progress towards these greenhouse gas emissions goals for 2030 and 2040. But the PRC is being tasked to collect inventory, greenhouse gas emissions, inventory data for the entities under its jurisdiction. And so this is an area that we have little to no experience with. And so as Arthur mentioned, talked about the resources we will need down the road to comply with this. But it's, it strikes me, first of all, it's as a fairly significant undertaking. That's one. But number two, New Mexico Environment Department, is my understanding from working with a prior colleague who used to work at the Environment Department. I mean, that's the primary agency responsible for air quality, water quality, et cetera. And then they have direct responsibility over entities, plants, operations located in New Mexico that emit greenhouse gases. And so many of those are electric generation plants. But the definition of greenhouse gases in this bill is that they are from sectors or sources that are owned or operated in whole or in part by any person, and includes electricity generation, both imported and produced in state. So again, and the way I read this is that the definition appears to seek to capture emissions that are associated with electricity consumption, or emissions attributable to electricity consumption in New Mexico. And New Mexico has, as you all know, SBS and El Paso Electric are multi-jurisdictional utilities, and the service territory straddles the state line, and the grid is operated as a whole. So there are the energy is is aggregated, and some of it is consumed in one side of the line, and some of it on the other side of the line. But we can't specifically trace, the movement of electrons. We could allocate based on consumption, which is what we do in the context of rate cases when we allocate costs. But so I think that the definition raises some complexities that will need to be addressed. And generally speaking, the electric generation that we have oversight of is not necessarily the same. Well, it's definitely not the same. There's an overlap, but there's not the same as the emissions that are monitored by the Environment Department from electric generation facilities. So they cover all facilities. They'll cover 100% of Four Corners. They'll cover other facilities that we don't necessarily have complete jurisdiction over. And so they capture a lot of this data to begin with. I mean, I don't know precisely what they get, but I assume they get enough data to fulfill their mission to control these emissions, that they meet current environmental laws and rules. And so, and our data will be just for the entities that we regulate. And if we have to start tracking greenhouse gas that's attributable, and I'm going to illustrate it, attributable to PNM's share of Four Corners, or PNM's share of San Juan, or SPS's share, or PNM's share of Palo Verde. I mean, I assume that's a zero emission plant, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But, or SPS's share of Tolk, which is the coal fuel plant, or Harrington, and what is the share of those emissions that are attributable to electricity consumption in New Mexico, which is what the definition of greenhouse gas emissions suggests it would do. And those are additional complications that need to be addressed. And I'm not sure, well, I question when we compare the two sets of data, New Mexico Environment Department's data, and which they actively monitor, and the PRC jurisdictional entities data about greenhouse gases that we don't currently monitor, but we would need to develop the ability to do that over time. There's some significant overlap in there. And so I just wanted to mention those challenges to the commission, that my perspective of it. And my FR is still in draft form, and I understand what, as I said, I haven't had a chance to talk to Arthur, so we're kind of speaking now in front of the commission. But those are the issues that I saw in the bill based on my review. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Just a clarification, does this only apply to investor-owned utilities, or is it applicable to rural electric co-ops, most of, whom are members of Tri-State and purchase 95% of their power from Tri-State? So is there a distinction there?
It would apply, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, it would apply to PRC jurisdictional entities, which would include the IOUs, it would include the distribution cooperatives, and whether it includes Tri-State, Western Farmers, or the marketing Guzman Energy, which supplies energy to Kit Carson. I assume it would apply, through the distribution cooperatives, but I, don't know precisely, that is another wrinkle that would have to be addressed.
If I may, Commissioner.
Yes, Arthur.
While I agree with John's point as an important one to keep in mind, that the assistance that we're getting from the Department of Energy and the National Lab should help clarify that, in that they would be looking to federal sources, the FERC Form 1 reports from every entity that generates electricity. And so we would certainly, it would certainly be incumbent upon the PRC to work with the other state agencies to make sure there's not duplication of reporting and to make sure that the numbers jibe, but that's details to be worked out.
Thank you, Arthur. Any questions of Arthur or John? Commissioners, what's your pleasure? Do you want to support this? Commissioner Fishman, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. I do support this, and I recognize the issues that John has raised. But I will say that I guess I'm looking at kind of two things in the larger picture. By the time this really gets into place, we will have the new appointed commission. And I don't know how many of you have seen the recommended new salaries for the appointed commissioners. They're going to get paid a lot more than we do, which actually is a great thing, I believe. But I think what it speaks to is the idea that the legislature and the governor are likely, once we move to the appointed commission, be open to devoting a lot more resources to helping our agency achieve its mission. And my tendency is not to worry so much about the extra work or the manpower that may come, because I think that the policymakers are in a position that they're going to provide those resources. So I'm not letting that hang me up on this one. And I do believe that there's a lot of benefit to this for at least what this agency can contribute to reducing greenhouse gases. If we go forward with it, it creates a database that allows us to have a game plan, as opposed to jumping from proposal to proposal and then seeing if it somehow meets the larger goal. I think if we put this together, we'll have a game plan that helps get people, including utilities, on the same page. So I think it's a really worthwhile piece of legislation. Could be a bit of a pain in the butt for some of us and some agencies, and I acknowledge that. But again, I think the resources will be there, and I think it's the right thing to do. So, my perspective.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. And I might mention that on the transportation electrification side, there are active contracts between New Mexico Department of Transportation and New Mexico Tech on coming up with models to measure greenhouse gas emissions from transportation sources, because as you know, transportation is the #2 contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. And so And the objective is to begin measuring the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions due to transportation electrification. So I think there's already efforts, I think, underway consistent with House Bill 6. So I would be inclined to support House Bill 6. The only thing is we probably should, depending on how we act on this, talk about how we handle any potential amendments that could be material, because we're looking at this legislation as a snapshot or a point in time, and it could be subject to change as it navigates through the legislative process. So with that, any other comments or questions for Arthur or John? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the letter of support as presented.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Byrd.
So I'm neutral on this. I'm not going to approve, support it or not. I agree with Commissioner Fishman's statement that the future of the PRC probably will be different than it is now. They'll get the funding they need for staff. However, I still stand behind my statement that if it isn't right now, let's fix it now and not pass things or support things that we know have potential problems. So that's why I'm neutral. I'm not opposing it, but I'm not in favor either. And so however you guys want to handle that, I know traditionally we've said that if all 5 don't approve, we won't support, but at least I ask that just my name not be on it. And because like I said, I don't support it, but I don't disapprove either. But I have issues that I think are big holes in this legislation that need to be fixed.
Hey, Commissioner Byrd. Anyone else? Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah, I like the commission precedent that if we don't have unanimous approval, we don't send commission endorsement one way or the other.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think we should take actions that imply or rope a commissioner into supporting something that, or opposing something that they feel differently about. But we do have the ability as individual commissioners to send a letter. And I don't have any problem with if individual commissioners want to send the letter as just their particular position on the bill, just proceeding that way. And I think that's fair to everybody.
Okay, so are there any objections to sending the letter with a portion of commissioners signing on? Because right now the letter of support as drafted includes all commissioners on it.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vicente Aguilar.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if my colleagues remember that during the legislative session, we allow our staff members to discuss the legislative bills that are being proposed. And we study it from different angles, and we don't endorse or we don't support it until 2 weeks left in the legislative session, whether we support it or not. I'm just making a note that that's how we practice in the past, and hopefully that can be considered this time as well. Secondly, Mr. Chairman, I believe that our staff should have the opportunity to review the bills and then allow our staff to present their policy standpoint according to the statute and the Constitution. That way, they are ready to go to inform the elected commissioners where these issues stand. So I would like to make that a practice from starting today. We should not be rushed into supporting certain bills just because a certain committee passes with a 3-2 vote. We should not support certain action just because another state agency or 2 agencies are requesting a letter of support. I think we should have our own individual review process. And like Commissioner Byrd indicated, he would like his name off on this particular bill on House Bill 6. And I would also be included to leave my name off on House Bill 6 as well, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. All right, Commissioner Hall is not here to concur whether or not she'd like to sign on to this letter, but clearly it's not unanimous. And I know Commissioner Fishman, you said, our past practice is that, if only a handful of commissioners, not all of them, wish to support legislation, that we can send a formal letter. I just want to remind the commissioners of that, and if they're okay with a subset of commissioners signing on to this letter, then we'll move forward and do that. Any objection to that? All right, so I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the letter of support without the signatures or the signature block of Commissioners Byrd and Vicente Aguilar. I don't know if we should include Commissioner Hall. Your thoughts, Commissioner Fishman?
Yeah, I don't have the letter in front of me, but I think it needs to be drafted to be sure it's super clear in the letter itself that this is not a full commission endorsement. This is just a notice from 3 commissioners and how they feel. But it's not, under our rules, it's not a commission endorsement. We have to be super clear about that. And I think that's only fair to Commissioners Vicente Aguilar and Commissioner Byrd.
Okay, Arthur. So I think the very first sentence clearly states that it's a unanimous support. So we're going to have to clarify that first sentence and amend it.
Sure. There are 2 places, Commissioner Maestas. There are 2 places where an edit would be appropriate in this case, and so the first one would be if there are 2 or 3 of you that want to sign, it would be we as members of the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. And then at the very last sentence, we would change the PRC hopes to see this passed. We say we hope to see this passed if that's the language that you wish. So I'm happy to make any changes that you want.
And I would also,
Fishman.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'd also say that Commissioners Byrd and Vicente Aguilar, I think you should feel just as comfortable sending in a note with, with concerns on this if you feel that's appropriate, and that you could send it out under the same process that we're sending this note out through Arthur. And so I just invite you to do that, because this is a market of ideas, and all the ideas from the PRC should be getting to the legislature. So.
All right, then I'll move that we approve the draft letter of support with appropriate amendments that explicitly states that only a portion of commissioners support it, and that we also, another amendment, that we eliminate the signature blocks of Commissioners Hall, Vicente Aguilar, and Byrd. Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second?
I will second.
All right, second by Commissioner Fishman. Okay, under discussion, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Mr. Chairman, we are taking action at the moment with the assumption that Commissioner Hall is in favor, and she's not present.
No, I excluded
So
her.
you cannot take action today because 2 commissioners has voiced their opinion opposing it, and you don't have the majority because Commissioner Hall is not present. The best thing to do is to bring this back next week when she's present.
Well, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, in my remarks, when I made the motion, I excluded Commissioner Hall and her signature block.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. All right, any other discussion on the motion? Judy, take the roll call vote.
Yes, the only thing I would add is if Commissioner Hall wants to send her own individual letter, she could do that on her own behalf. But I concur with Commissioner Vicente Aguilar that we don't know her opinion on this letter at this point. So the motion was just including Commissioners Fishman and Commissioners Maestas.
Correct.
Okay, roll call, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
No.
Commissioner Byrd.
Yeah, no.
I didn't hear that.
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
There's not a majority as there is a 2-2 vote, so the motion fails.
All right, let's move on to House Bill 37. Who is going to kick this off, Wayne? Is it you?
Mr. Chairman, John Reynolds can handle this one. He was at the hearing yesterday on behalf of the agency and has been tracking this legislation and prepared the FIR.
Thank you, Wayne. John?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you, commissioners. This bill was heard before the House Consumer and Public Affairs Committee yesterday, as Wayne mentioned, and it did pass by a 3-2 vote. The bill enacts the Community Energy Efficiency Development Block Grant Act, which is essentially to be overseen and administered by EMNRD. And it provides for a grant program to support energy efficiency measures in low-income and underserved communities to improve energy affordability metrics among those communities. This bill was essentially part of a larger bill a year ago that was directed at COVID support. That bill did not pass, obviously. So this is an element of that earlier bill without the explicit COVID support. The bill has, so there are 10 sections in the bill. The first 7 sections of the act that I just mentioned. The last 3 sections, 8 through 10, are the ones that are impact the PRC. And it directs the PRC to promulgate rules by December 31st, 2023 for every utility under its jurisdiction to submit quarterly reports for the utilities to submit quarterly reports regarding customer disconnections, arrearages, and customer eligibility for low-income heating assistance programs by customer class. And it also requires annual reports, again, from all utilities about the number of prospective customers within the service territory that are not receiving utility service and the reasons why they're not receiving such service, along with any other information to help improve access of utility services. And again, it's a broad utility services, speaking broadly, it's electric, gas, water, and wastewater. And as I mentioned, it impacts all the utilities, the investor-owned utilities and the cooperatives, and investor-owned utilities are electric, gas, water, wastewater. There's further language that requires the PRC to issue orders requiring reports from the utility, further reports from the utilities. And the 2 sets of reports, and I'll just be pretty brief about them. The 2 sets of reports are, one is about developing a cost benefit and feasibility analysis of providing, and this is in quotes, all prudent energy efficiency improvements and unquote, to 50% of low-income households by 2030 and to 100% of low-income households by 2050. And the report is to further address the affordability of rates and to identify low-income discount rates that, along with the energy efficiency improvements, would make electric service reliable. And it further provides for to consider changes to just a moment here, changes to rules, statutes, orders to ensure universal access to what is referred to as essential household services, and to meet certain energy affordability metrics. The next order and both of these are required by the end of December 2023. The commission is to issue an order requiring each public water and wastewater utility to provide a similar cost benefit analysis, but about adequate water service. And that's a defined phrase in this bill, to 50% of low income by 2030 and 100% of low income households that desire such service by 2050. Subsequent to those two sets of reports, the commission is to solicit public comments about these reports and to hold a public hearing on the reports to solicit recommendations to address the issues raised in those reports. And a year later, by the end of December 2024, the commission is to either promulgate new rules or issue orders in response to the recommendations to make reasonable and consistent progress towards access to essential household services, energy affordability, and to reduce the energy burden with the similar goal metrics I mentioned earlier by 2030 and 2050. And by the same date, December 31, 2024, an analogous set of rules would be required or commission orders to address recommendations concerning water and wastewater service to make consistent and reasonable progress towards improving access to water and wastewater service with the goal of providing, meeting the metrics I mentioned in 2030 and 2050. The energy efficiency programs that are pretty central to this entire bill, and the definition of energy efficiency in the bill is somewhat different than the definition of energy efficiency in the Efficient Use of Energy Act. And the definition in this bill includes not only what's in the Efficient Use of Energy Act, but it also provides for improved water quality and indoor air quality, which are two factors that are just not elements of the Efficient Use of Energy Act. And the Efficient Use of Energy Act also requires a cost-effective energy efficiency programs, whereas that's why I highlighted the quote earlier about prudent energy efficiency measures, and that's the prudency is not defined in there, so there's a lot of leeway. The other terms that I mentioned were defined, and I think it's worth knowing about. Essential household services includes internet, electric, natural gas, water, wastewater, and other services connected to a domicile. Energy affordability, that metric is defined as whenever the combination of electricity and gas utility customer bills do not exceed 5% of the customer's annual household income. And adequate water service refers to 24/7 piped or well water service that meets state and federal safety standards. The last item I'll mention about the bill is that it amends the discrimination clause of the Public Utility Act by allowing the commission to approve and for utilities to request reasonable preferences or advantages to low-income customers so that the commission could approve rates that are based on serving certain customers based on income. And so that's a significant amendment to the discrimination clause of the PUA. So in the presentation to the House committee yesterday, there was a lot of participation. The online poll, which they do at the beginning of these virtual meetings, polls people that are watching the hearing, and it was a 57-7 for and against. The supporters are largely many individuals and people that represent groups like Sierra Club, Conservation Voters New Mexico, and a few other groups that I'm not recalling at the moment. And on the flip side, on the opposition side, all three IOUs, as well as the State Association of Rural Electric Cooperatives, were generally supportive of the energy efficiency development block grant program, the first 7 sections of the act, but they had strong reservations about the 3 sections that I'm focusing on in presenting this to you. And one of the concerns, for example, was that for the utilities to collect customer income data they felt was quite problematic for them. They don't have the data, and they're not particularly interested in getting the data. That's sort of my summary of their objections to the bill. So that's a rough sketch of the bill at this point, and I'm available for questions.
John, can you just cover the actual fiscal impacts and what additional staff resources we may need?
My analysis in the FR, which you should have, is that this is going to be a significant undertaking for the commission to address the goals that are spelled out, and the commission proceedings that'll be necessary in the next 2-3 years, and the reporting by 2023, and new rules or orders by 2024 to reach certain goals on affordability, on access to various services, and to try to reach some form of what is referred to as water and energy equity. In my view, this will take, I'm trying to recall the fiscal implications. I think we had, because this requires us to improve, improve our knowledge about customer income and affordability metrics and some socioeconomic factors that we don't customarily examine very closely, but that I believe there will be required 2 additional FTEs for us to develop the expertise and support the commission in the upcoming reporting and rulemaking and proceedings that would take place, along with the long-term nature of these goals through 2030 and through 2050. It would be a sustained long-term additional effort for the commission to pursue.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John? Any comments on House Bill 37?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, John. So what I have not found is this going to apply to municipally owned utilities, city-owned, publicly owned utilities that we don't have any jurisdiction over?
There's no language that I recall where this would apply to entities that are not under the PRC's jurisdiction. I mean, if the PRC is required to issue orders and to promulgate rules, maybe the General Counsel can speak to this, but I assume by definition of our authority, that would apply to the entities under the commission's authority. I don't see how they would apply beyond that.
Okay, and I do agree with that assessment. Again, I'm not an attorney, but I couldn't find anything that made it apparent that this is going to apply to those utility providers. And in our recent moratorium, it did not affect them whatsoever. The cities were disconnecting people whenever they didn't make their payments, and there was absolutely no avenue for those customers to find assistance. They couldn't come to us. We don't have any control over it. So again, this is another bill that I find that it's adding burdens to utilities that we're already monitoring this situation. Maybe we don't have as much control as this is going to provide, but then there's other utilities that are just running the way they want, and with no oversight. And I know they have city councilors or commissions, whatever there is there, but it's a whole different structure with the city council over a utility than it is with the PRC over a privately owned utility. And so the impact is significantly different. So again, here, this is one of those I can't support this bill. To me, it's not written in a manner that's protecting all New Mexicans equally. It's leaving some out in the dark, and it's just not well written in that manner. If they add language in there that would include municipal utilities to have to report to someone so that that's being monitored as well, then that's a whole new bill. But anyway, so that's where I'm at on that, Mr. Chair. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. Any other comments? Commissioner Fishman?
Yeah, just for the policy makers out there, on the reporting requirements, I find them very kind of vague and difficult. I understand what they're trying to get at, to create accessibility for everybody. And theoretically, under the PUA, our intent is to provide service to anyone who requires it. And if people can't afford the service, we're not fulfilling that obligation. But the reporting just feels very vague and difficult to get your arms around. So I think a lot of work needs to be done on that. And I certainly agree with Commissioner Byrd and the utilities on that. On the other hand, there are a couple of things here that I think policy-wise are really good. One is that we can do low income rates. Quite frankly, we do retention rates, load retention rates for large companies, where basically if they decide they can, go elsewhere and get their electricity cheaper or build their own generation, that the utility can come and say, oh, don't do that, we'll give you a better rate and you can stay on. So we do have special rates for a lot of folks, but because of Mountain State's court decision and current law, we can't do that for maybe the people who need it the most, the low income people. So I think that part of the legislation, I hugely supportive, and a lot of other states have that. I'll make one other comment. This is just for the benefit of any policymakers who may be listening in. Right now, we have the utilities doing the energy efficiency programs, and it's, those include things like subsidies on light bulbs through stores and that kind of stuff. And I just, quite frankly, don't understand why we have utilities doing that. And that if we're looking at this kind of a legislation, to me, it really makes sense to take all the energy efficiency and put it in one place under one department and not have all of the jurisdictional issues that come up and end up costing us money. And that if we had a statewide entity that was managing the energy efficiency programs would have the advantage of being able to offer them to co-ops who don't have the resources to put those kinds of programs together. And that's about 1/3 of the power consumption in the state. Co-op could decide to bring on that energy efficiency program or not. But at least it would be available and put together for them in a way that they could, that more customers could take advantage of across the state. So I'd really encourage policymakers to look at that and see if we can come up with something that's a little more streamlined. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, any comments on House Bill 37?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 37, what I was able to conclude after reading the bill is that I don't see the system as a stability across the board. I don't see the system as balancing as far as the Energy Development Block Grant is concerned. And lastly, the resource advocacy. I don't see any party supporting this. I know that this is a proposed legislation, and I like to read which parties are supporting this legislation. And so those are my concerns, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Well, you know, I looked at this bill and I still feel that there's some log rolling here. I think that was the issue that we had with a similar bill a year ago. I think if it, strictly focused on energy efficiency block grants, I think that would be a good thing, but I'm a little concerned about it getting into kind of the rate setting realm where, what they're suggesting is a departure of normal rate setting that's typically, associated with cost causation. So I just think it's still chock full with too many issues. And the other thing that I'm absolutely adamant about is that states like Michigan have a vital component to their energy efficiency program, and it is to deal with the energy efficiency waivers. These are situations where households have more fundamental life safety code issues that precludes them from receiving energy efficiency improvements. We're talking leaking roofs, mold, electrical issues. And so I think it's past due that the state of New Mexico add a funding source to address energy efficiency waivers. What we do today is if we encounter a household that has these life safety code issues, they don't get anything. They don't get any assistance, and their life safety code issues remain, unresolved. So I agree with some of the commissioners. I'm really not ready to support this piece of legislation, and I'm recommending the policymakers to really consider adding an energy efficiency waiver program and funding source for that, similar to the state of Michigan. So we don't have unanimous support for House Bill 37, but I believe it is our process. If any individual commissioner, wishes to speak in support of it in any setting, they should qualify their comments as speaking for themselves and not the entire commission. Yes, Wayne.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, just to make sure that we are clear from a staff perspective on our marching orders. Clearly, there's not a support for the commission to endorse this. Is the position of the commission to remain neutral on this legislation, or is the position of the commission to oppose this legislation since there's not unanimous support?
Well, Wayne, I agree with Commissioner Fishman that there's really good parts of it. So I certainly could not oppose it in its entirety. I'd like parts of it. So that's my position on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's helpful.
Anybody else that want to respond to Wayne's? Commissioner Fishman?
Has potential, needs work.
Okay. We can certainly convey that message to the sponsors as well, and the concerns that have been raised by the commissioners.
And Wayne, I'll certainly provide that information on the energy efficiency waivers program in Michigan.
Okay.
Let's move on to House Bill 70. Now, there should not be much discussion here because this is legislation that's actually carrying out a recommendation that we made formally in the form of our report to the legislature regarding the State Rural Universal Service Fund. And so I am confident that we will have unanimous support. So I'm going to go ahead and read the caption. House Bill 70 relating to telecommunications, amending the Rural Telecommunications Act of New Mexico, raising the cap for obligations on the State Rural Universal Service Fund to $40 million per year for the years 2022, 2023, and 2024. Authorizing the Public Regulation Commission to spend up to $75,000 for audits or evaluations of results of certain expenditures from the State Rural Universal Service Fund. Would anyone like to just speak on this briefly from staff?
Mr. Chairman, I believe Russell, if he's still on, is able to do so. He and Mike did the majority of the work on the FIR that we put together.
Mr. Chairman, you're absolutely right. The commission, the bill would simply adopt the commission's recommendations that were made in the report in October, the October 1st report to the legislature about this SOUSF. So I don't really think I have much to add. We worked with sponsor Representative Figueroa on making sure that the language accomplished that, and it does.
Legislators are listening to the Public Regulation Commission. This is nice. So do I hear a motion to support House Bill 70? All right. Motion by Commissioner Fishman and second by Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Any discussion on the motion? Judy, please take the roll call vote.
I'm sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0 regarding HB 70.
Thank you, Judy. Let's move on to Senate Memorial 10, which is what I think that we're asking for in our previous action. So is there a need to present on this memorial? Wayne, do you want to just briefly present on it? Let us know what's happened with respect to Senate Memorial 10.
Yes, happy to, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I actually think we need to have some discussion about this because the scope of Senate Memorial 10 and House Memorial 20, which is not on the agenda, but it is an identical memorial to Senate Memorial 10, it is fairly significantly different than what the commission considered in terms of the petition. And so I don't want to take too much of your time as chairman, but John spent quite a bit of time on the FIR, Russell has as well, and I would like one of them at least to go through what the requirements are of Senate Bill 10 are, if that's acceptable to you.
Sure, Wayne and John, and I guess Russell, if you could also highlight the differences between Senate Memorial 10 and the petition that was filed regarding public power.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll take the lead because I took the lead on this FIR. And I'll note that this that the proposed order that I drafted today for regarding case 21-309 UT, the petition before the commission from the joint petitioners, legislators who are also sponsoring this memorial, would raise these issues as well, because I think these issues, the issues that are raised by that we've raised in the FIR are significant issues. Should be addressed in both the docket before the commission and to the legislature, and this FIR does that. This is what I would say. The commission recalls that at the January 12th open meeting, there's a discussion of the scope of the commission's role in whether under the petition that's before the commission or under a joint memorial. And I think the commission came away with the idea that I certainly did, with the idea that the joint petitioners were considering a narrower role for the commission, including such as just housing or being a custodian for such a study of public power. But this is a problem. One of the problems is that as you recall, in the joint petition before the commission itself, there were contradictory visions of what the role of the commission would be. Sometimes it was discussed as being a custodian or just housing the study and with very little participation. And then there was discussion of the commission being the entity to issue bench requests and pursuant to what a privately funded contractor would direct the commission to include as informational requests to regulated entities. Well, there was confusion in that petition. There's confusion, a whole set of different types of confusion and contradictory ambiguities and contradictory provisions in Senate Memorial 10 and its companion bill HB 20, the House Bill 20, or House Memorial 20, regarding regarding the role of the commission and the proceedings. I'm just going to say it's simply bizarre. It's Senate Memorial 10 is a bizarre amalgam of what I believe are some of the normal ways of proceeding with an investigation conducted by the legislature, and then a sort of I'll say it mashed together with some kind of participation of the commission, which is just absolutely unclear. So so it raises whole new levels of ambiguity, and it conflicts with the idea that the commission would have a very narrow role under either the petition that's before the commission or these memorials, which are supposed to mirror it, as I had understood, and I think the commission understood. Okay, so the bill summary that I prepared has a lot of quotations directly from the language of the memorial, because I'm going to read it to you. Because you'll see the ambiguities. The memorial would require the Legislative Counsel Service to cooperate with the commission to investigate, pursue discovery, and continue regulation to evaluate and determine if public power ownership for New Mexico would result in a net public benefit. Investigate and pursue discovery; those are things that would happen possibly in a proceeding to study something. Continue regulation. What does that mean? That isn't continue regulation is something that isn't done isn't a kind of proceeding, something that happens in a proceeding. It doesn't even make sense. I'm sorry, but it's just I was a little frustrated by this memorial because it's just so ambiguous and just odd. The memorial would further require that the Legislative Counsel Service, in conjunction with, that's the language used, the commission, conduct and oversee a study to determine the public ratepayer, environmental, economic benefits, et cetera, of public power, public utility, state level public utility. What does that mean? Does this mean this is an investigation by the legislature, employing the powers of the legislature to compel participation by regulated utilities, to compel information? or is this the PRC? How can it be the Legislative Counsel Service in conjunction with the PRC? Is it who's in charge? If we have a disagreement as to how the study should proceed, it could not be less clear and more problematic than it is. Okay, the memorial would also require the commission, quote, and other stakeholders to report to the Legislative Finance Committee. Okay, well, is the commission conducting this study in conjunction with the Legislative Counsel Service, or are we just providing information pursuant to subpoenas or however else? I'm not very familiar with how the legislature ordinarily proceeds with investigation, but I assume they have the power to compel responses to requests for information from entities like the commission. From our records, we could provide information in that manner, just like any other stakeholders, such as regulated entities. Utilities are regulated by the commission, but that would involve the commission just responding to information requests. It wouldn't involve the commission conducting the study in some way, or anyway, you get the idea. That is so ambiguous. I have no idea what the commission's role would be under this memorial, but it would clearly be well beyond just housing the study. And in fact, it sounds like the legislature should house the study, conduct it, and just ask for information from the PRC as needed, just as it would ask for information from regulated utilities and other people having information relevant to the study. But that's not what this does. It just does sort of hodgepodge of things that I can't even interpret. So in the significant issue section, the commission would note that the memorial does not specify what the role of the commission would be in the study. It appears that the Legislative Counsel Service may have ultimate responsibility for the study, as it would, quote, conduct and oversee the study. However, the memorial requires the Legislative Counsel Service to do so in conjunction with the commission. So all these things that I pointed out as difficulties in language are specifically stated as issues in the significant issues section. It notes the possibility of disagreements and asks who would be in charge. It's also unclear whether the commission would have to bear any costs of the study. The vision of the study that's been presented to the commission in the petition and in Monday's filing by the joint petitioners in that docket, it reiterates this, would be this idea that it's going to be a consultant or an experienced consulting firm that presumably has experience in other states with regard to implementing public power, would decide what information was needed from what entities, regulated utilities, et cetera, to proceed with the study, and would create they would create an information request that the commission would then issue via by a binding order bench request to regulated utilities. And as I said today, I don't believe the commission has the power to do that. Here it's unclear. There's no mention of a consultant. There's no mention of private funding. There's no mention of funding at all. There's no appropriation attached. It's not clear whether the PRC would be housing and possibly funding part of the study, or all of it, or a budget. There'd be appropriation. Again, as you probably hear from the tone of my voice, it's upsetting how vague, ambiguous, and contradictory the provisions of this memorial are. The study the FIR says that the study would require substantial one-time funding at a minimum, as neither the Legislative Counsel Service nor the commission have the breadth of in-house resources necessary to conduct and oversee a study of the magnitude contemplated in this joint memorial. So I'll wrap it up here. So the commission, in the significant issues, that commission would note the docket with the pending joint petitioners petition for the proposed study. And it would state that the petitioners, coming out of the open meeting, the discussion between the commissioners and representatives of the joint petitioners, it seemed that the petitioners were seeking only a limited level of participation in the proposed study from the commission, and two, the petitioners were in the alternative, seeking passage of a joint memorial. This was reiterated. I mentioned that this was reiterated in a filing on January 24th. That was the legal memorandum that was filed in the docket by the joint petitioners, which states the petitioner's expectation that the commission would be a custodian of a study conducted by a consulting firm, which would be funded from private donations. Although, as I noted, that is one of the visions. That's one of the visions of the role that's presented in the legal memorandum. The legal memorandum itself contains contradictory language about what the participation of the commission would be. But we state in this FIR, it appears that the joint memorial envisions a far more substantial role for the commission in the proposed study and may conflict with the petition filed before the commission. They conflict with each other, the memorial versus the petition. The petition has internal conflicts, so does the memorial. It could not be more confused than it is. Then the commission notes that the memorial's deadline of December 1st of this year to complete the study and report to the Legislative Finance Committee is likely not achievable given the broad scope of the study, the lack of clarity about the roles and responsibilities of the Legislative Counsel Service, the Commission and other parties, and the lack of resources provided in the memorial. The selection and engagement of a consulting firm would probably consume months. The process of whether it be an RFP or who knows. The memorial doesn't indicate whether the commission would be involved in conducting the procurement process. This would note that the commission would note that in this FIR, the deadline is 1 month before the transition to an appointed commission, and the transition to the new commission will be a priority of staff during that time and consume significant resources to complete. Plus, if if this is a study that's going to be, if it's the appointed commission that's going to that ends up inheriting a public policy, a public power, mandate from the legislature, it might be a good idea to have them involved in the study, so that they have their input and ownership or in the outcome of the study. Finally, the commission would note in the memorial, in the FAR, that the memorial would have the PRC and quote unquote, as I said, other stakeholders reporting to the Legislative Finance Committee and interim committees. This would be an unusual role for the commission, as it would appear to require the commission to report to the legislature alongside the utilities that the PRC regulates. Now, as I said, that would not be a problem to the extent that the commission could be among the sources of information that a legislative investigation would draw information such as from our records and from our institutional expertise. But this role is not just the provision of information that might also be included in which the commission might be an information provider, and other regulated entities could be information providers, pursuant to requests for information from the legislature. That would be okay. What they seem to be asking for here is that the PRC make recommendations to the LFC and give status reports as to the progress of the study and these other stakeholders, like regular utilities, that aren't just providing information subject to requests addressed to the PRC and to the regulated utilities, but sort of making recommendations as to the final the final issues like whether public power is a good idea for New Mexico, what the benefits are, what the detriments are, and how it should be implemented. Like the commission possibly would be making recommendations either in agreement or in opposition to recommendations and input given by the utilities that we regulate. That could create unresolvable conflicts of interest for the commission if public power is eventually adopted in some form, because the commission would later be, if the commission were given any regulatory authority over public power, the commission would then preside over matters to which the utilities would be parties. Whereas in this proceeding before the legislature, there seems to be some role where the commission would be like a party to the matter alongside the utilities, and of course that would be also be in conflict with this idea that the commission would be conducting and overseeing this study, or that the Legislative Counsel Service would be overseeing the study in conjunction with the commission. I'm sorry if I went on a bit,
Russell,
rambled a bit, but it's a very confused bill with memorial with very many problems.
okay, I get it, Russell. Now, first off, from where I sit, we just took action to table the petition asking the PRC to study public power, some public power models, pending the outcome of Senate Memorial 10 and House Memorial 20, but we didn't put any conditions on those memorials. So what I would suggest, and I believe we've already indicated conditions on this legislation. I believe we want the legislature to take action to clarify the role of the PRC, to make an appropriation. And so it sounds like there's some fatal flaws with Senate Memorial 10 that's inconsistent with what we expect from the legislature that may cause the PRC to become involved in some appropriate role. So what I would suggest is that we forego any action on this, but in the interest of the previous action on the petition to study public power, that we agree on conditions, specific conditions in these memorials to inform the sponsors of appropriate amendments to make that would clear the way for us to take action on the petition. So anyway, that's my take on this. And I'm also just wondering if this study were to overlap into the new term of the appointed commissioners, I believe the timing of the removal of our constitutional authority, it takes effect on January 1 of 2023. So how will that affect our authority if this study spills into past January 1, 2023, where we no longer have any constitutional authority?
Oh, well, Mr. Chairman, I haven't analyzed this issue in any detail, but the Public Regulation Commission as an entity will continue as per, with regard to its existence and the duties and responsibilities that it has under the relevant statutes, and would have if a memorial were passed that gave the commission responsibilities with regard to the study. That is the commission's existence and its duties. Those are continuous through the transition. It is the constitutional amendment has to do essentially with how the commission is constituted, but it doesn't affect the existence of the commission as an agency or its duties to others under relevant statutes. So even though there wouldn't be continuity in the internal in the internal makeup of the commission of the agency, the commission would exist, as of December 31st and as of this year, and then continuously through the transition as an entity with the same duties that it always had, or that it had before on December 31st. It will have in January 1st, and the same powers.
Thanks, Russell. So before I open it up to the commissioners, does the FIR, is it adequate in communicating our concerns with respect to Senate Memorial 10? And in your opinion, do you think it would inform appropriate changes if the sponsors are willing to make those changes in response to our concerns? Because I still feel this is tied to our action on the petition to study public power.
Mr. Chairman, it absolutely is. Absolutely. That's why this FIR mentions that petition and the representations that were made to the commission, or at least the role that seemed to be developing for the commission and the petition versus what is provided in the memorial itself. Those are absolutely connected. And in the petition matter that has been tabled, my proposed order includes an excerpt of the entire significant issue section from this FIR, just because these conflicts between these two visions are very critically important issues that have to be resolved, as well as any internal ambiguities that are in contradictions that are in each of the versions, that whichever prevails, if any, the petition for the commission or the memorial. So I think this does raise the concerns very well. It doesn't provide a vision of what the commission expects from the memorial, except that it says that we were anticipating essentially being custodian. I'm sorry, I saw that Commissioner Fishman wanted to ask a question, so I wanted to make a comment or a question. Is that correct?
No, I don't. Well, complete your comments first, Russell. So.
Okay, so I guess I would say this FIR very much raises the concerns that I just described that the commission would have with this memorial. It doesn't say precisely this is how we would rewrite the memorial, because I don't have a commission decision on that. So I think Commissioner Myers says what you said, Mr. Chairman, what you said is exactly correct. It would be a good idea to have the commission say decide what its preferences would be with regard to proceeding under the memorial. Let me just say it's perfectly reasonable and would make sense to have a different type of proceeding under the petition before the commission versus one under memorial, to this extent, and I'll describe it. If the petition, if there's no memorial and there's no legislative authority, then the commission is left in the joint petitioners are left with the commission, and that presents the jurisdictional issue of the commission does not have the power under the PRC Act to conduct an investigation into public power. It's outside of the powers of the commission. So there's the jurisdictional issue, and that necessitates that the commission have only a very limited role in overseeing such a study, and that the commission should only house the study, and the study would be basically a privately funded and privately directed study. The consulting firm that would be retained, I guess, by a group of the joint petitioners and funded from private funding would be conducting it. It would be private study, and it would be just housed at the commission. It wouldn't be under the public auspices of the commission or the public auspices of the legislature if that happened, if there's no memorial. So, but we could certainly have a docket open just to maintain filings, but we wouldn't be able to make the consultants' informational requests have the force of law because there's no jurisdiction there. Whereas if a memorial were passed, then it should probably proceed as an ordinary legislative inquiry without. And I'm not all that familiar with how the legislature proceeds in a legislative inquiry or investigation or study, but I assume that they have the power to compel responses and the production of information from agencies like the commission and regulated utilities, and it's probably the broadest power in the state to compel the production of information because it's the legislature, it's the highest authority in the state. So it should simply be conducted by and the normal procedures that they use for an investigation, and the commission would have no role then in overseeing it or conducting it in conjunction with the legislature. The legislature would simply do it, and they would subpoena or provide information requests, or we would provide information voluntarily in the investigation from our records as an expertise from our staff members as requested. That seems to me I see no reason to depart from that to create this ambiguous joint structure that is in the memorial. So that's what I would recommend. There are two different visions because there are jurisdictional issues, but they're very straightforward under what I've just described. So with that, I'll cease my long discussion.
Thanks, Russell. Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah, and this is just a couple of thoughts for the memorial sponsors, if they're listening in, and I'm assuming somebody is. Number one, there seems to be this strong desire to get this study done and done quickly, and for whatever reasons, to have the Public Regulation Commission be deeply involved in it. What I want to point out is if forcing this through is not going to help anybody. If this commission were to put together a study and the legislature wasn't totally behind it, nobody's going to look at it anyway. Nobody's going to care. Everybody will have wasted their time. So it is very important to have a memorial that makes sense and that the legislature supports, so that before we engage in this work, there's an audience that actually is interested in looking at it and considering it. So that's number one. Number two, the memorial, it in the whereases, it seems to indicate that one of the problems they want to solve is, the profit margin goes to investors, and couldn't this money be used for public purposes or to lower rates rather than generate profits? My suggestion would be, in constructing a memorial, state very clearly what it is you want to accomplish. And you may want to be a little bit careful about limiting it to state level public utility. State the problems you want to solve, and then ask, if you want to do a study, to study all alternatives to meet the problems that you're solving. Because this memorial seems to presuppose that our only options are state level or what we've got now. And there's a whole group of options that are out there. And, last week when this was discussed, I pointed out, Permanent Fund has $22 or $23 billion. They could get a majority stake in PNM for $2 billion. Is that an option? Is that a way that you could achieve the goals that you want to do? And I'm sure there are many others. So what I would suggest is that state your issues that you want to solve, and probably if you don't presuppose public utility as a solution, you might get more support for getting a study done. So that's just based on what I've been hearing today. pragmatic, not legal matters, but please consider them.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. Any other commissioners that wish to comment on Senate Memorial 10?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Byrd.
Thank you. When Senator Hamlin came, she said she was going to talk with us and work with us to make this work right. And I hope she's still listening, because there was a lot of questions asked of her that day that really weren't answered, both legal and financial questions. And this memorial doesn't appear to answer those questions. And if it just gets tied up in the courts, even if we choose to move forward with the investigation and it's challenged legally that we don't have any authority to do it, then it doesn't progress this concern in the right direction. So this memorial has to be able to address both legal, financial questions and give some direction as to what all should be looked at. As Commissioner Fishman said, maybe let's address the problems and find solutions rather than let's provide a solution and go look for some problems. So I'm hoping that the Senator Hamlin and the other petitioners are open to suggestions and will make the corrections amendments to this memorial that answer the legal, financial, and objective questions that are being asked. I think we have thought about this quite a bit as a body here at the PRC, and will need true guidance and legal authority to move forward in what their objective is. And I don't think we're opposing their objective, but we got to have the right authority and finances to get it done.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah, and I should have added, there's lots of discussion in the regulatory community about the utility of the future, and lots of discussion that utility structures are going to change, both for technological and political and policy reasons. There's a whole bunch of reasons why. So that's a constant topic of discussion. And I think that they're raising these bigger issues is absolutely appropriate, and that it's worth study, and that the legislature and policy makers should all have a complete menu in front of them of what their options might be going forward. So I really commend all the folks who are bringing this up for looking at the bigger picture, and it's completely appropriate. So, you know, all of this feedback we're giving, which probably sounds pretty negative, no, we're trying to make it positive so that we can actually take these efforts and they bear fruit. And so anyway, I just wanted to be sure that the sponsors of SM10 and the legislators who are behind this understand that. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner Fishman. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, do you have any comments regarding Senate Memorial 10?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the time. I think the more people that we have driving this proposal, I think we will make better decisions at the end. I do not agree with a rush process, because if we're going to change the public utility structure, we need to hear from all sides. Maybe the commission can take up the inquiry that's before us and allow other utility companies to create a record so that we can balance our decision. Right now, we are listening to one party, and I don't think that is right. Although my colleagues expressed that this study is going to be something that we need to lean on to amend or restructure public utility the next few years in order to start communicating and collaborating the right way. I think it's best that we, as commissioners, to invite representatives from all utility companies. And that's where I stand on that. It doesn't matter what the conditions that we would like in the process. That does not matter to me. What's really important is that we look at the outcome and make a successful decision for our organization. And I also like to involve our staff, our management team, to see if we are treating every company appropriately. And I like to hear that from staff at some point. But all in all, I think what we are striving is just to achieve, to have a clear strategy and to have a vision that's understood by customers, investors, and regulators. And I commend my colleagues. We stand strong to invite an inquiry like the one that we have just made a decision on today about a public utility study. I think that shows the brightness of how we lead as a regulation commission. And I am proud of that. And I am proud of each and every colleague that I serve with. And I am also proud of our division directors. Whenever we get pulled over to the side, they bring in their best talent. And I commend our general counsel's office. They're working around the clock to look at every legal aspect of what's going to work for the commission. So I think they realize that people out there that are listening realize that this is a set of commissioners that's not just going to say yes or no. We're going to dive into the issues and we're going to say what's the best way to move forward. And for this particular bill, it's very sloppy in my opinion, and I don't like a rush process. The only time that we have is probably to send them a message that we need to have public comment session from all parties. That's the way I see it. That's the only way I'm going to have a balanced decision on this particular issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Well, I think it's clear we don't support Senate Memorial 10 as it's written, but I really feel that a sense of urgency to communicate specifically some of the changes we'd like to see in Senate Memorial 10 and House Memorial 20 beyond just including those messages in our FIR, which, as all of you know, it becomes aggregated with all the other FIRs. So I would like to communicate formally our concerns because it's tied to the action that we took in this meeting earlier regarding the petition to study public power. And I think we have an obligation to do that. So Wayne or Russell, should we come back with perhaps a formal letter from the commission regarding both of these memorials? Or does the commission wish to empower the staff to put together a letter to appropriate legislative sponsors and maybe legislative council service communicating our concerns with these memorials? Because again, if we remain silent, then our action regarding the petition regarding public power it's dead in the water if these memorials don't address our concerns. So Wayne or Russell, any comments on that?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to work with Russell and of course course, John and the rest of the staff to put together a letter for the commission. I do think if we can get the commission to agree on a set of concepts that you would want to see in any memorial of this nature, that would be, coming from you would be better than coming from staff. But I'd be happy to work on that and get that to you, get that turned around very quickly.
Are there, yes, Russell.
I would just add, with regard to the procedure, like the who would be best to who we would address a letter to, et cetera. I leave that to Wayne because he's much more familiar with legislative processes. But I would say, you know, the FIR points out our concerns with the bill, with the memorial, but it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't provide an alternative vision for how what the memorial should be, what the role of the commission should be. And so I think the commission should hear and now you know, decide that part of what those recommendations would be with regard that would be put in this letter, because I think that's a crucial thing to add to the letter is to, you know, reiterate the problems with this memorial, but also say, you know, positively, which I think you were referring to, Mr. Chairman, as what we see the proper way of proceeding would be. And I outlined what I described how I don't see why this couldn't proceed as an ordinary investigation by the legislature as to potential legislative action, which is what would come out of any study anyway, would be recommendations for legislative action. With regard to how I'm not familiar with those proceedings, but I would my recommendation would be why don't you just conduct this as an ordinary study legislature? There's no reason that's under the auspices of whether the legislature as a whole or a particular committee or the Legislative Council Service. I'm not familiar with that. And the commission would have no role in overseeing it or conducting it because it would be under the auspices of the legislature. And the commission may have relevant information, probably has relevant information that could be requested in a formal request or an informal request from the legislature, from whatever legislative entity is conducting the investigation. And that would be, the commission would simply be a participant. It wouldn't even need to mention the commission because we'd just be an information source for the council. And I would also know there's a discussion by the joint petitioners in the petition matter that says that refers to the expertise of the commission and its information as making it the commission the proper body to conduct or oversee this. And I would say, no, that's not the case. The commission does not have expertise with regard to public power or implementation of public power. A consultant, presumably, whoever would retain this consultant, a consulting firm would seek a consulting firm that has expertise in the implementation of public power in other states, just as the commission, with regard to its proceedings, with regard to community solar, et cetera, looked for a consultant or consultants that had expertise we don't have. We don't have public power here. We don't have community solar here. We look for people who are experienced in other states to do the guidance. We don't have the commission doesn't have the expertise to guide this process because we haven't done public power. What we have is information in our records and expertise with regard to regulation and operations of utilities in general that will be relevant to whoever does have the expertise to conduct this study. So there's really no reason the commission should be involved in conducting or overseeing this study. It's a legislative study. So that's my recommendation.
So let's do this. Wayne, if you would take the lead with Russell to draft a letter to clearly specify our concerns and include some suggested recommendations. And it should go to both sponsors on the Senate side and on the House side and bring it back for commission review and potential action next week. And I would like the letter to refer to the action that we took regarding the petition requesting that we oversee a study on public power models just so that they know that our action and our sentiments concerning these memorials is tied to official action regarding the petition. Are there any objections to that course of action?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Byrd.
No objection. The only thing I might ask for a change is that this is simply a letter saying these are the issues that we have here at the commission. Of course, we're absent Commissioner Hall, but she will have time to review it. Maybe we could get this letter completed by the end of this week and actually out to the bill sponsors, the memorial sponsors, so that we give them as much time as possible to at least respond to our concerns rather than waiting a whole nother week. It's just a letter. As long as, I think we've all expressed similar concerns today about what's going on with this memorial. And so as long as everybody, all 5 of us agree, and I suspect Commissioner Hall is going to be somewhere in the same ballpark anyway. So anyway, I'm going to ask that we do this letter, but as soon as Mr. Props, Mr. Fisk are able to assemble that letter and submit it to us for review and comment, that we get it back to them and try to get it to them sooner than a week.
My concern, Commissioner Byrd, is we might be engaged in a rolling quorum. If all 5 commissioners take a look at this letter in the absence of any official action. Judy, do you have any comments on that? Is there a way we can expedite this letter without formally getting the okay of every commissioner? Because I mean, I accept the staff's recommendations outlined in the FIR.
Yes, Commissioner Maestas, members of the commission, I too agree with an issue of a rolling quorum, especially if there becomes any discussion about, well, the letter looks good here, but change this here, and then somebody else says something else. So I think it would probably be best to either wait till next Wednesday or have a quick meeting on Friday to adopt it, if there was an urgency.
Commissioners,
Mr.
I mean, I think we can wait until next Wednesday, but Wayne, I guess I'll defer to you. Do you think this is extremely time sensitive where we should try and get something out by the end of the week, the work week?
Mr. Chairman, I do think that you can wait until next Wednesday. I do want to point one thing out, though, and you're probably all aware of this, so forgive me if I'm telling you what you already know, but Senator Fishman probably remembers this from his time. This is a House memorial and a Senate memorial. They are not joint memorials. That means that it only has to pass one House for it to take effect. So if the House memorial passes and the Senate memorial doesn't, we would be responsible for carrying out the requirements of the House memorial. So this is something that is a bit different. If it was a House joint memorial, the House would have to pass it. It would have to pass over to the Senate. It would have to go through the committee process there as well. So it is something that if the House decided to act on this quickly, it wouldn't, and passed it next week, which I don't necessarily think is going to happen. That would be it. This would be deemed in effect for us. So that just, again, my apology if I'm probably telling you what you already know, but there is that little bit of a legislative wrinkle that is in play here.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Wayne. Commissioner Byrd.
So with that, I'm okay with that. My concern is a memorial does not have the force of law behind it. And if our legislators move forward with the memorial saying we have to do it, they're going to be under that same conundrum that, well, the law says we can't. So I ask that those who are listening, please wait. We're coming.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. That sounded really ominous, but I get you. Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah, I don't see any rush to have a special meeting here. Hopefully the sponsors of the memorial have been listening in since it's in our agenda. And the people behind it came to us first. I expect they're listening in, and hopefully they have the benefit of our thinking. So that's it.
Okay, I think that was a very good discussion. Wayne and Russell, is the direction clear that we are, Wayne, you will determine, who this letter should be addressed to. I think we ought to submit it to both sets of sponsors on the House side and Senate side and clearly outline our concerns regarding this memorial. And again, mention that it is tied to our action on the petition as well.
Absolutely. It's clear.
Mr. Chairman, can I? Yes. Oh, so, I'm sorry, Wayne, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Wayne, go ahead, and then Russell.
I think we're clear on what we need to do, and we will have a draft to the commission no later than noon on Friday.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, I think this is a very good idea. I would just clarify that it sounds to me like the commissioners would accept the inclusion in the letter of something that goes beyond just the concerns that have been raised in the FIR, but to make a statement as in the commission doesn't see why this shouldn't proceed if the memorial passes as an ordinary as under the usual procedures of a legislative investigation without any participation by the commission except as an entity that's not running, that has no role in running the study or the investigation, but stands willing to provide information from its records and as requested, just like they'll request information from the utilities. It would be do we have authorization to include a statement like that?
Russell, so just make sure that the message and the contents in the letter is consistent with the matters of law that we've already addressed in our related orders regarding the petition.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that absolutely would be. I mean, the commission hasn't really made any definitive findings in writing with regard to these issues, and hasn't made any recommendations in the FIR as to how to proceed. It's just has noted the concerns, which is why I think it'd be a good idea to say, hey, given these concerns, why don't we just do it under your ordinary procedures? And I think that's a good way to, and I think that will be something that legislators will respond to. Why wouldn't this be a normal legislative investigation? So I will go ahead and include that. And I just want to note, Mr. Chairman, you're absolutely right. These, I've already begun treating these matters as so closely related that both matters, the pending petition before the commission and the related memorials are discussed in both matters. So the FIR for the memorials talks about the conflicts with the petition proceeding, and the order that I drafted today and that I would be bringing back next week talks about not just the petition for the commission, but the conflicts with the memorial. So I think both matters should be addressed from now on within both matters. So everyone's aware of both proceedings.
Thank you, Russell. Commissioner Fishman.
Russell, I just wanted to say yes to your proposal. So you hear it from each of the commissioners. You're not feeling uncertain.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and so Wayne, we didn't discuss House Memorial 20, but I believe you stated that they're identical. So what we say about Senate Memorial 10 applies to House Memorial 20?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That was a good, robust discussion. Let's go ahead and move on. But yeah, it's just past noon. It's almost 12:30, and we only have 2 more pieces of legislation to discuss. So I'm reluctant to have a full lunch break, but would the commissioners like a 10-minute break? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break and we'll reconvene at 12:30. Thank you. All right, everyone. We're going to reconvene. It's 12:30 by my atomic clock. So let's get going on resuming our discussion and potential action on pending legislation. Wayne, question, you list some potential legislation, but it wasn't filed at the time the agenda was posted. So are you just listing that for information for the commission? And can we skip over those and move on to Senate Bill 42?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend we skip over those and just move on to the ones that are on the agenda. There'll be plenty of time for the commission next week's meeting to consider any other legislation.
Sweet. Okay, let's move on to Senate Bill 42. This is a bill that we discussed at great length with the sponsor, Senator Padilla. So Russell, are you, and again, I'm going to just state that I assume all the commissioners are very familiar with the legislation. At the time we discussed this last week, I don't believe we had the FIR. We have the FIR now. So Russell, if you do address this, if you want to just maybe summarize the FIR on this Senate bill.
Mr. Chairman, Senate Bills 42 and the one that follows in the agenda, Senate Bill 71, they're both sponsored by Senator Padilla, and they were both discussed when they were pre-filed bills last week's open meeting. I believe it was last week. But I led discussion and prepared the FIR, or not led discussion. I responded to contributed to the discussion of Senate Bill 71, and I prepared the FIR for that. That's the one regarding parity of regulation among incumbent local exchange carriers. But it was John Reynolds, I believe, who discussed Senate Bill 42, which is the utility easements issue. They're easements for broadband, but John Reynolds really has the expertise here.
John?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yes, I drafted the FIR for Senate Bill 42, which enacts the Utility Easements for Broadband Act. And I know that, Senator Padilla, the sponsor, presented the bill to the commission. And I briefly summarized some of the elements in the FIR. I mean, I won't summarize the bill. I think that's pretty clear to everybody in that it allows utilities to develop broadband infrastructure on top of their electric infrastructure, and to seek cost recovery from utility electric ratepayers for the development of this, what is referred to as communications infrastructure. The FIR, the significant issues in the FIR pretty much revolve around this cost recovery construct in the bill, which provides for this utility-led development either by them or through a third party without prior approval of the commission. So they can go ahead and develop this communications infrastructure, then subsequently seek recovery from ratepayers on utility electric bills. So it would essentially allow for electric companies to raise capital from electric ratepayers to develop communications infrastructure. Now, the ultimate idea is for this infrastructure to be available to, on a wholesale basis, to lease or license to telecommunications providers. And should any income from that leasing or licensing would be subsequently credited back to ratepayers. The precise construct of that is to be determined by the commission, but the idea is that the ratepayers would put the money up front and then would be maybe reimbursed some or all or more than what was invested to begin with. And so that was the major issue, that significant issue that I had in the FIR. The questions were raised at the discussion with Senator Padilla and the PNM expert. So you got some answers from them on that. So I believe that, I don't have the FR in front of me, but I believe that generally is the gist of the issues that I've raised. And I'm available for questions.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John? Any comments on this piece of legislation? I think it's a no-brainer. I think the concept of using existing utility easements to expand telecom infrastructure, I think, is good, but obviously I'm concerned about the cost recovery portion of this piece of legislation, and I think the sponsor expressed no desire to make amendments to it. So my advice would be, I can't support it as it's written, but I think we ought to take action with some kind of message to the sponsor to see if they're willing to amend it as a condition to getting PRC support. Anyway, that's my take on it, and the floor is open. Any commissioners that wish to make any comments regarding SB 42? Don't chime in all at once.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Byrd.
Excuse me. I have a frog today. Anyway, I agree with your assessment there. I don't know that Senator Padilla said he wouldn't consider an amendment, but I know he didn't want to do any substantial changes this late in the game, but maybe some amendments that would make it a better bill. I think he would always be open to that. And I think you're right. Let's make those recommendations regardless and hope that he'll look for that support.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. Any other commissioners?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
I should alert you that I did take the liberty of sending a note to Senator Padilla suggesting a couple of changes. And my big concern was that the way the bill was written, you could set up charges to customers right away, but then you couldn't set up a mechanism for returning revenues earned on the telecom lines back to the customers until there was a rate case. And we've seen recently with EPE and now with PNM, them go 6-7 years between rate cases. And so I pointed out to the senator that would be very unfair to ratepayers, and that probably you should consider being able to set up the return of revenues back to ratepayers at the same time that there's approval for the project, and set up those mechanisms at the same time. And I also made a recommendation to give property owners 30 days notice. I didn't send it around to everybody because I was afraid of rolling quorum issues, but I did copy John Reynolds, and I talked to John about this bill, and he was very helpful, and to Wayne. But I just wanted to let you all know that as a personal note from me to Senator Padilla, I suggested those very succinct changes. And that I agree with you, Commissioner, Mr. Chair, that the goal of this bill is it's a no-brainer. This is one we should get done because it'll save consumers. It can save consumers a ton of money.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, any comments on Senate Bill 42?
Mr. Chairman, I think there's my biggest concern regarding this bill is I don't agree with what the telecommunication companies have done in previous years. What I'm hearing from my constituents is that the right-of-way issues, it can be referred to as the easements. There's a huge list of telecommunication companies that did not follow the right procedure for the easement process. And they should not be waived when this bill is passed. And I just don't feel that's the way to do business by the telecommunication companies. So I would not support this bill, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. So Wayne, we have, I think, our position in our fiscal impact report. Is that enough for you to convey the sentiments of the commission when it's brought up before appropriate committees?
It is, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so then without objection, then this commission does not support this piece of legislation as written, but we do have some messages in the form of changes we'd like to see as specified in the fiscal impact report. And Wayne will use that to convey his message at appropriate times during the legislative process. Is there any objection to that course of action?
None. And
Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah, sorry. Again, I encourage commissioners. I just sent my personal note to the sponsor, and once again, I encourage other commissioners to do the same with their points of view.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, then without objection, let's move on to Senate Bill 71. This is another bill that was discussed in detail and presented to us by the sponsor last week. Russell, do you want to just give us an abbreviated summary, but focus on the FIR, kind of our specific concerns?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is the same parity of regulation bill that was presented by Senator Padilla. And then I had already included a 3 or 4 page memo to the commission before the discussion last week. The FIR largely recreates that. That discussion discusses the intended effects of the bill to achieve parity between the level of regulation or the cumbersomeness or burdensomeness of the regulation that's applied to large incumbent local exchange carriers, or LILECs, of which there's only one currently, CenturyLink QC, that are regulated under the New Mexico Telecommunications Act, and parity between that level and the level of regulation applicable to rural ILECs, which are in fact rural in this state, but are defined as having fewer than 50,000 lines. So that's the cutoff between LILECs and rural ILECs. And the commission's discussion last week included some commission comments that parity between the two sets of ILECs, or essentially between CenturyLink and the rural ILECs, with the level of regulation, sounds reasonable and fair. The issue is that the level of regulation of the rural ILECs is very, very low. I said little to none, and I indicated we have no consumer protection or quality of service rule applicable to the rural ILECs, and it doesn't appear that we have the power to do so under the Rural Telecommunications Act, whereas we do have the power to do so with regard to CenturyLink under the New Mexico Telecommunications Act. So the lack of parity that currently exists is due to the fact that these are two different statutes. But of course, the issue of, well, why should the commission treat them so differently under CenturyLink so differently when it's been losing lines and is not an ILEC that's much larger than the rural ILECs at this point, and it's larger, but also it's. You could argue that they provide the same services, and why shouldn't the rural ILECs have a quality of service? Well, rural, et cetera, and why shouldn't there be parity? And I think some commissioners were receptive to that argument, but the concern was that the commission didn't want to. Some commissioners expressed concerns with bringing the level of of regulation of CenturyLink down to this level of that the rural ILECs are at, well, essentially none with regard to services, at least, as being, well, I think some of the commissioners are not happy with the fact that we have so little power to regulate the rural ILECs. And the thing is, even though the bill would leave it open as to how the commission could achieve parity, it doesn't say that it must be that the level of the regulation of CenturyLink must be lowered to that other level. That's the only option due to the operation of the Rural Telecommunications Act, because the Rural Telecommunications Act does not provide the authority, not any clear basis for authority, not any express basis of authority to raise the level of rural ILECs to some sort of mid-level and then bring, sort of to equalize the two to achieve parity. So it would really be bringing this, the result is that CenturyLink's level of regulation would be almost eliminated. It'd be so low if to achieve parity. Now, that may be what is being sought in the bill. Commissioner Hall brought up the possibility of including a provision. She brought this up with Senator Padilla of including a provision in the bill that would amend the Rural Telecommunications Act to allow the parity to be achieved by an increase in the level of regulation of rural ILECs. Maybe there could be both adjustments, bringing down the level of regulation on CenturyLink under the New Mexico Telecommunications Act and raising it a bit for the rural ILECs under the Rural Telecommunications Act, if the bill were to address the Rural Telecommunications Act as well. And Senator Padilla said in not so many words that he didn't say this explicitly, but the understood, I think, message was that the rural ILECs would probably be able to kill that bill pretty easily. They would definitely object to it, to any increase in their level of regulation, and they seem to have, a sufficient. What has been described to me many times as a very good deal under the Rural Telecommunications Act, and they would want to probably preserve that. So Senator Padilla seemed to be referring to, that including a provision like that as not possible. Sorry to get into the weeds on the discussion, but I think that discussion last week really outlined what the concerns, what areas where the commission is sympathetic to the idea of parity, but the concerns that arise with how the parity would have to be achieved. So going on from that, this would also, the bill would also amend the effective competition portion of the statute. Again, only applicable to CenturyLink at this point, which allows a carrier to petition for findings with regard to certain of its services, in particular service areas, that it's subject to effective competition, and therefore competition will do most or all of the work of regulation, and the level of regulation for that service should be reduced. CenturyLink was unsuccessful in a petition that was filed with the commission in 2018, I believe. The commission denied that petition based on the test that was in place at the time for whether effective competition existed. This would revise that to make it an easier test to meet, both in terms of its complexity and in terms of substantively it would be easier. It just has a lower level of showing for any carrier here, CenturyLink, that would want to make that showing with regard to any service. There are some alternatives provided. I won't get into the weeds on that. There is an appeal pending of the commission's order denying adopting the recommended decision to deny the petition, which is pending. But if this legislation were passed, it would moot that appeal, because it would provide a different test, as I said, for effective competition. And then finally, it would change the reporting requirements under the New Mexico Telecommunications Act with regard to would add additional issues about the effect of the act and the commission's regulation upon the regulated services of essentially CenturyLink at this point, of any ILEC serving more than 50,000 access lines. So, and the bill would add a requirement that the report specify the steps the commission has taken to implement parity regulation among all ILECs, consistent with these proposed amendments in the bill. So just quickly, that's the substance, and those are the issues. The FIR notes under administrative implications, this bill would require the commission to amend its quality of service and consumer protection rules applicable to LILACs. That is to say, that is how parity would be achieved. It would be lowering the level of on CenturyLink, because we don't have the power to do much more when it comes to rural ILECs to raise their level. Let's see. Oh, it says also passage of the bill would presumably prompt CenturyLink QC to file a new petition or multiple petitions for different services for findings of effective competition to be considered by the commission under the new test under this bill. So that would be, it could create some administrative burdens upon an agency that has many at this time. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Russell? But I guess, Russell, you mentioned the current number of lines that CenturyLink has. I thought you said it was around 160,000. And you also mentioned that the cap on the number of lines to be considered a rural ILEC was 50,000. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I didn't say what the number of lines served by CenturyLink is. I believe Senator Padilla may have said that last week. I don't recall the number, but it was somewhere over 100,000, which sounds right. At one time they served, I think, over 300,000. So yes, it is well above the 50,000 line threshold of for the differentiation between a rural ILEC and a LILAC. But it's gotten a lot closer, because like I said, I think it used to be in the 300,000s not that long ago.
Okay, before I open it up, I know we've really had issues with quality of service and consumer protection issues, and I think we've already fought off a Supreme Court appeal on that very issue. And at this point, I'm reluctant to relax any quality of service standards. And so anyway, that's just my general comment on this at this point. So with that, I'll open it up to other commissioners. Any comments regarding SB 71? Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mr. Chair. I am, under the current law, what Russell's basically telling us, under the current ILEC law, essentially this bill requires us to completely deregulate CenturyLink. Is that correct, Russell?
Yes.
So, I just can't support it if that's being the case. Just a side question is that, and by the way, I get plenty of, I don't know how many formal complaints come through, because people sometimes just give up, and don't report problems. But in speaking with other customers of CenturyLink, and I'm a customer of CenturyLink, is as it is, I get plenty of grumblings. My second question, Russell, was that effective competition demonstrated that there's two or more carriers. Once effective competition is demonstrated, does that get reviewed periodically, or is once that determination is made, you never go back to it?
Boy, Commissioner Fishman, what a good question. I do not, I'd have to review the statute to see. I don't recall the statute providing any power or duty of the commission to continue to review whether effective competition continues to exist after the determination has been made. I can take a look at the act to see if it does. Very good question.
Yeah,
I thought of it as
particularly. Yeah.
what was that, Commissioner? I'm sorry.
Well, particularly in more rural areas, competitors come and go. I mean, the economics in some areas are growing, some are shrinking, so it's not as clear cut as it might sound at first blush.
That's a very good point. I do think it's possible that the bill, the New Mexico Telecom Act, with regard to effective competition, was, the provisions were written and then amended during a time, when competition was just increasing because wireline was coming in and taking away customers from wireless was coming in and taking away a lot of customers from wireline companies, which is a major reason why companies like CenturyLink, the incumbents that are wireline companies, lost so many lines. But as you know, there are areas where that's not happening now, or wasn't happening, or is anymore, or may stop and may reverse. There'll be less competition. So that's a good point. I'll look into that. One thing I will no, I just wanted to describe how in the FIR I described the regulation of rural ILECs, because I've said little or no, and Mike Ripperger helped me with this portion. So I'm just going to read this. It's just a couple sentences. Though the commission does not here provide a comprehensive analysis of its authority under the Rural Telecommunications Act, it is clear that the commission has little to no authority to regulate rural ILECs with regard to their operations generally. Accordingly, the commission has no quality of service rule or consumer protection rule in place for rural ILECs. Most of the commission's regulation of rural ILECs concerns the receipt of state rural universal service fund monies under 639H6 of the RTA. There's a lot of room for regulation there because conditions to be put on the monies. And there have been discussions in the past, since all the rural ILECs do receive SRUSF funds, whether the commission could include regulation of quality of service as a condition to the receipt of those funds. Because like I said, the commission's broadest power over rural ILECs concerns the SRUSF funding. It's not clear to me that we would. We certainly have the power over to look into the use of monies, which is why the commission recommended audits of the access reduction support recipients. The commission has as I noted in the FIR for that, the commission has the authority to do that. We just don't have the money. So we ask for the authority to use SRUSF money. But it's not clear to me, and I doubt that we could really pass, we could adopt any kind of substantial quality of service regulation under the auspices as a condition of receipt of the funds. I don't think the RTA gives us that much.
So and my take would be, I agree with Commissioner Hall. I could probably support a bill in this direction if we under the ILEC statutes, we were granted some limited ability to regulate quality of service. And of course, we look at SB 42 and we're supporting it, or I'm supporting it because I think, broadband is critically important to folks. And our public policy keeps saying that. But then when it comes to having some controls of the quality of that service, we don't follow through as if it's important. And again, I don't think we have to have rural quality of service regulation that necessarily is as extensive as what we have for CenturyLink now, but we should have something. And unless that's put in place, I certainly can't support this bill.
And I would just note, Commissioner Fishman, that the commission doesn't have any authority to regulate the quality of service with regard to broadband, period, whether in no matter what kind of carrier is providing it. Although we do have the power, obviously, to place conditions upon projects that receive money from the broadband program fund. So there, in that sense, it's not a regulation of the quality of service. It's a condition of the funding. I will note, and we've noted this to the legislature and past FIRs, the state has the power to regulate broadband. There was a question under the former administration in Washington, the FCC had declared itself without the jurisdiction to regulate broadband. This was in the context of net neutrality bills, net neutrality regulation that was being proposed. And then the DC Circuit issued a very important opinion that said, well, it's okay for the FCC to find that it doesn't have jurisdiction to regulate broadband, but it can't then, as the FCC attempted to do, preempt the states to do it. So it said, having declared this broadband service not subject to FCC jurisdiction, and necessarily the states have the power to do it. So that was an important decision from a few years ago by the DC Circuit. And then the FCC basically lived with that for a while, and states started to prepare legislation, net neutrality legislation. And I think there were some proposals in our state. I don't know if they went anywhere, but what I say is the state has the power to do so, has the power to regulate, but they haven't delegated that authority to us. And our current statutes really can't be read to include broadband regulation. They just include the broadband program, where we fund some projects with conditions. So I just want to clarify all that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. And one thing I do want to state for the record as well is Christopher and I, we field many complaints. And I think one trend that I'm seeing in the nature of these complaints is there are residential folks that live near a main line, telecom line, but there's a reluctance to extend it to allow access to such services for nearby residents. And I just have two instances. I don't know if that's a policy across the board, but we do get a lot of quality of service complaints. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, any comments on SB 71?
My concern, Mr. Chairman, is that to deregulate the current law on telecommunications, that's something that I've been against for a very long time. I feel that, we should continue to enforce the best quality of service to many customers, and I think that is our duty, and I will stand by that. So I can't support this bill because this bill's intent is to deregulate. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. I was just discussing with Commissioner Byrd about the trends in the number of landlines. I thought in the report to the legislature or in a past case that there was a kind of a reversal of the trend in the decrease of landlines, that they could be increasing. Russell or Mike Ripberger, is anyone seeing those kinds of trends?
I'll answer this. Yes, Mr. Chairman, very good point. The 2017 amendments to the statute, included this adjustment to the Rural Telecom Act, included an adjustment to sort of bring down these level of access reduction support payments to the rural ILECs based on their line losses. So it's based on like each year the payments would be reduced by a percentage corresponding to the percentage of access line change. And it had been down quite significantly from 2018, I think, when it became effective to to last year. And then this year, you're absolutely right. The number of lines by some of the, and it was noted by our fund administrator for the fund, especially some of the companies who receive the biggest access reduction support payments, they saw increases in their lines. They reported these increases. And I said to the commission, in a discussion of the docket concerning the fund size and what was available for broadband program funding, that it was surprising. We in 2020, the commission had, after the access reduction support payments and all other obligations of the fund, had $13.9 million available for the broadband program, whereas this year, because the access reduction support payments went up by so much, the commission only had about $11.5 million to spend. I was shocked when they told me that. I don't know what's behind that trend. It's something we could look into. Maybe Mike could answer that. Mike Ripperger. I don't know if staff has looked into it or heard anything about why that has reversed.
Commissioners, Mr. Chairman, I'd have to go back and look at some of those numbers again. My understanding is there's probably a couple carriers who, by virtue of the fact that they may be expanding a bit, are adding some access lines, but there are other carriers that continue to see a loss of access lines due to wireless substitution, and because people are streaming, and so they're getting a broadband only line. I'd have to look at those again. I do know that because Sacred Wind is now eligible for access reduction support, that certainly would add lines to the payments that are due to carriers. And they're one of the carriers, I think, that where their access line counts may be increasing a little bit or holding steady. But again, I'd have to look at those numbers again. My understanding, though, overall, for the most part, is that your traditional TDM-based access line counts are still going in a downward direction.
And Mr. Chairman, can I just add a little clarification there?
Sure, Russell.
I think in the numbers that were discussed when it came to the access reduction support recipients, late last year when we were talking about this issue, Sacred Wind was separately addressed, the amount that they would receive, which was determined in that petition proceeding last year, because though they receive access reduction support like payments under the legislation that was passed just last year, they aren't actual access reduction support recipients, but their support is sort of modeled on ARS payments, because their argument is, hey, we would have been a rural ILEC receiving those payments if we had existed at the time of the act, so we should get that or something similar. But what they ended up with in the legislation is something similar, which does include will include adjustments for access lines, but the existing rural ILECs, their payments, they went up on their own. As Mike said, some of them may be expanding their businesses. I just wanted to differentiate between the Sacred Wind issue and the actual ARS recipients.
Thank you, Russell. Mike, did you have anything else to add?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, no, I do not.
Okay, it seems that Commissioner Fishman.
Just real quickly, Mike, I'll be looking forward to your little bit deeper analysis of whether we've just added Sacred Wind and that added all the lines, or whether there's a reversal in the trend of declining landlines. So when you can get that to us, I'd sure like to see it.
Okay, I will dredge that information up and get that to everyone.
And Commissioner Fishman, I would just clarify. I think we should look into the causes of this, but there definitely is a separate taking Sacred Wind out of the equation. There definitely was an increase among the ARS recipients, period. So that is something to look into, but it's definitely not just Sacred Wind.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so it seems that we unanimously do not support this bill, and we can't ameliorate our concerns with tweaks or minor changes. Is that my reading, members of the commission?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Byrd.
No, I actually conceptually agree with this bill. And I'll explain my position. CenturyLink was equivalent to more than a handful of the smaller ILECs combined. And so one complaint by us from a small ILEC customer would be equivalent to 7 or 8 CenturyLink complaints. And when you get a complaint or 3 or 4 people complain on CenturyLink and you find out it's a residential area or an area that's being served by a common problem, then even though the complaints was in 3 phone calls, it's one service issue. And so when you look at it, complaints per 100,000, I don't see CenturyLink as being any worse than most of the other or any of the other service providers. Being a member of a big company that we have absolutely no control over, I still have service issues with my carrier at times. And so anyway, just like with SB 42, I think Senator Padilla conceptually is right. So I don't oppose his bill here. I think there's some issues within the language that could be, of course, make it better, which keeps me from supporting it. But I don't oppose it.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. Okay, so we're mixed. So we don't have unanimous support, and we don't have a unanimous position against it. So Wayne, is this enough direction for you? What I'm hearing too is that we want quality of service standards to continue. And so is the FIR enough for you to scrape some talking points if you're asked to comment on SB 71?
It is, Mr. Chairman.
All right, anything else? Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, any final shots on SB 71?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think it was a very good discussion on all the legislative bills, and I see where people have their issues, and I see where they stand on the issues. So it's a very good discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Then let's move on to communications with the Chief of Staff. Wayne.
Mr. Chairman, member of the commission, I'll be brief. I think we've talked enough about the legislative session, with the exception of, as you probably know, we do have our Senate Finance Committee hearing this afternoon. I'll be leaving as soon as we wrap up here to go over to the Capitol to make that presentation. It'll essentially be the same presentation we made to the House Appropriations and Finance Committee last week. Of course, anybody who wants to tune in can do so via the New Mexico legislative website. And other than that, Mr. Chairman, I don't think I really have anything else.
Any questions or comments for Wayne? Just had a comment on the status of filling the commission advisory services positions.
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, I was afraid you would ask that. I don't really have a lot of good news on that front. We did have enough applications for the economist position for the screening committee that we have put together to at least take a look at those. I need to circle back with Mike on that when he returns to see where we're at. And Mr. Chairman, one of the things I might suggest is that we meaning the commission and myself, and kind of circle back entirely and bring Renee into the discussion as well, in terms of how we've advertised these. Are we missing something? We're just not getting the kind of response that I know you want, the kind of response that I want. I think we've covered most of the bases where we would find these technical advisors, but it might be good, maybe if you want to delegate it to yourself and the vice chair or other members of the commission to just have a call next week and see where we're at on those.
Yeah, I think we're all very hopeful and thankful that we're filling key positions in ASD, but I just want the same effort and rigor in filling the new advisory services positions. And so I think we should do that. Let's plan on Commissioner Hall and I maybe having a conference call with you, Wayne, and perhaps Renee and anybody else you feel to kind of talk about our current process in recruiting and see what we can do differently in the way of targeted recruiting in hopes of filling these positions.
We'll get that done, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Wayne. Anything else for Wayne? Commissioner Fishman?
Yeah, on this same topic, are these positions that we're trying to fill, the advisory positions for the commissioners, these are at-will positions, correct?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Fishman, yes, they are.
Okay. Given the fact that there's only, 11 months left until the commissioners are gone, do you think that's been impacting applications?
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission and Commissioner Fishman, it might. It's always hard to say exactly what's impacting this. We were able to by going to at-will positions, we were able to get the salaries up significantly over what we would have been able to offer in a classified position. So it's, I'm afraid it might be part of it, could be part of it, but I also don't want to give up on it yet. So just keep at it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. Anything else for Wayne? All right, let's move on. Communications with General Counsel. Judy, are you responding on behalf of OGC?
Yes, we have no communications at this time.
I'd just like to state in general, we should all send good thoughts to Michael Smith and hope that everything turns out well.
Yes.
All right.
We all concur with that.
Thank you, Judy. All right, let's move on. Communications with commissioners. Wow, you're all talked out. Okay, going once, twice. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned. Great job.